It is 2:30, and I am just getting ready to silence my phone. Sorry about that. We're going to have a study session on the Salina Police Department 2023 year in review, and I'll let City Manager start us off.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a whole lot to add. Chief Weiss and I had a conversation about some of the questions that had come up at City Commission meetings over the past few months, and saw this as an opportunity to kind of address those questions in the form of an annual update. So I'll turn it over to Chief, and he can walk you through the data that they pulled together.
Thank you. If we could pull up the slide. Next slide, please. So first we have kind of our current demographics of officers. We're sitting at 69 officers right now. And if you look at kind of the breakdown of officers, it goes by, race and gender and everything. At the very top, I'm the 1.4%. So, and then so we, and one of the things that we're proud of is female officers were at 21.7%. Currently. And a few years ago, we had made a pledge to a 30 by 30 initiative where it's a movement in law enforcement about getting, 30% of your force females by the year 2030 through recruitment and stuff like that. And so I think, our numbers are a lot higher than probably a lot of places. And so that's one thing that, I think that our recruitment has been doing pretty well at. Next slide. Here's our total applications since 2019. As you see in 19, we had 224. 2020, a lot happened in that and dropped down to 62 applications. 21, we were at 91. 22, we're at 94. And 23, we're at 99. Next slide. Here's our current staffing. So we're authorized 83 officer positions. Used to be 84, and we recently went and we asked for one of those positions to be turned into a civilian because we had a supervisor that was assigned out to our range. And as we talked through our staffing and everything, and people that had held that position, they said we could easily get this position handled through a civilian, which would free up a supervisor. So we turned that into that, and it should be filled within the month. And so, but it brings our current staffing officer-wise today at 69. Civilian, we're authorized 31, and we're sitting at 28 as of today. Next slide. Here's our calls for service back to 2019, and in relation to our custodial arrest, which is in the purple there. And so, and that kind of goes into like the breakdown of how much, we use force with our contacts with the public. And so for 23, we had, what was that? 39,956 calls for service. And of that, custodial arrests resulted in 1,783 arrests. And you can kind of see the comparisons where our arrest was up from the previous year, 22, is up over 21, up over our numbers in 20. 2019 looked like that was a pretty busy year, so for arrest. Next slide. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about use of force by officers. So I've got some highlights of our use of force policy. So here it kind of talks about when we can use force, taking an action that results in also when we document it. We have our standard use of force report, which is our incident report, and then we'll also do for use of force an additional use of force review that is done by the officer. And that takes place when anything results in an injury or an alleged injury to a person. If we apply force, either lethal or by non-lethal methods, and any type of physical force, anything outside of just handcuffing. If we discharge a firearm for anything other than training or recreational purposes, and any forces of entry into a secured building. Next slide. We also complete use of force when a suspect used force against an officer lethal force, or they use non-lethal force against an officer, or use of forces which result in an injury to an officer, or physically, or opposed to passively resisting arrest by suspects. Next slide. Our patrol supervisors get notified and they respond to the scenes when a suspect required medical attention after a use of force, an officer utilizes lethal use of force, or an officer requires medical attention from being assaulted. Next slide. Supervisors complete a use of force review, and it goes through our chain. It goes through, our first line of supervision is the sergeant. They will review it. It goes to a lieutenant. They review it. The patrol captain reviews it, or the patrol captain or the CIB over our captain over detectives will review it if it happens on that side. And then it goes to our internal affairs officer, who will review it also, and then it will come to me. Next slide. And in our reviews, as we're looking at stuff, we're looking for any policy violations or anything like that, any excessive use of force. And two, there's things that we may do. It's legal, but there may be means that we could do through training that we could do something different, a different route that may produce a different outcome. We also look at, is our training up to date? Is our use of technology up to date? Is there anything out there that we can review that may make it easier on our officers or be a better use in these type of situations? And then, of course, internal affairs will make sure everything gets signed off on and by everybody in the chain of command. Next slide.
Chief, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. It's a pretty broad spectrum that meets our policy definition of use of force. So if you could, in kind of your own words, from the lower end of the spectrum to what people might typically think of as use of force, what's kind of the lowest end that's subject to the policy, subject to review?
Lowest end would be even if we take a subject to the ground. And that was a little different from my previous agency. We didn't track that. And some of the things we also didn't track that we track here is even like if we display a taser. We pull a taser out and we don't use it, but we show. And so because where I come from, that was considered just a show of force. Well, here we consider it a use of force. We even have a thing called the body wrap. Like if someone becomes non-compliant, we wrap them up in. And that was kind of more of our decision that we decided, let's start tracking that and consider that a use of force. And we've had talks where, like, do we consider it? Because it's not necessarily use of force, it's a restraint. But those are some pretty simple things that I think some people may not think are considered a use of force, but it is. And so that probably just an anecdotal look, and Captain Feldman would know more, but the vast majority of our use of force are probably a display of force, either a taser display, as we're taking someone into custody. We may pull a taser out, and two, a weapon display. A lot of times if we're searching a house or even on search warrants, that you're always going to have a use of force, because officers, they would get in trouble if they were clearing a house without their weapon out. Does that sound about right?
So, and I'm repeating, but just to be clear, each one of those results in a use of force report and a review.
Yes. And even, one of the discussions we had this morning is even if we force a door open, we consider that a use of force. And, and we kind of debated, we're like, is that a use of force? And currently we track that. We're going to sit and have some discussions. And some of the things that we track is, we're CLIA accredited, and it's driven by CLIA. They ask for this kind of stat. So that's one of those things we may ask, because there's times where, to me, that is not a use of force. Usually the reason you're using it, it may result in use of force, but sometimes there's even medical calls where we force a door open, if we see someone down or something. So trying to part out, well, does this count? Does that count? That's where we were kind of having that discussion. Anything else? Like I said, internal affairs make sure everybody in the chain looks at everything and make sure we're looking at, and there's times where, because we all maybe have a different idea of like, okay, this happened, was that, give me some more detail on that. And we have a discussion too. And, and the internal affairs is the person that looks at all that and makes sure, level has been signed off on, and like I said, it may be that, you know, someone hasn't signed off on it, and then like I said, we're going to have a discussion like, okay, this happened, tell me some more information as we're pulling it out, and then we go, okay, I agree that was, you know, justified. And then they do an annual report at the end of the use of forces, or at the end of the year, to kind of, you know, look at what are we seeing in our deal. And so if you want to go over this past year's use of force.
So every year for CALEA, I do produce for the last 5 years since I've been in charge of internal affairs, I have produced a yearly report on it. And so what do we do is we track a whole list of numbers, and a lot of these charts will be up in the presentation also. What type of use of force we used. We even look at if there is a correlation between the day of the week, how many we average on a month. And as of last year, we had 248 use of force reports that we made. However, six of them are not reported to CALEA, and that's because our officers were victims of batteries during those times, and we did not use force against the suspect. The force was used against us, but that is a report we make if our officers are battered or assaulted, that we create a use of force report even if we don't use it. So over the last 5 years, we've seen a gradual increase. In 2021 is the first year we started tracking pointing the taser. So that increased it, probably it looks like 25, probably around 30 use of forces for the 20 to 21. And as we've seen over the year, we've also seen a drastic increase in the number of times our officers have been assaulted or battered during that year. Last year being the largest increase, I think we went up about 18% in our officers being battered or assaulted. And looking at it, the increase has really started in 2020 with everything that went on during 2020. What we've been seeing is that there's been a lack of apathy or respect for societal laws. We've seen that people resisting or not complying, and disrespect for law enforcement. So that's why we've been seeing this increase in the times we've been forced to use force. But when you look at the number of forces that we've used in relation to the number of calls we have, it's less than 0.5% of times we've used force in relation to the number of calls we went on, which was the 39, I believe it was, 35,900 or 39,000 calls. When you look at compared to the number of arrests, it's about 13-14% of the time that we have to use force in custodial arrests over the last year. Yes.
What's the difference between a custodial arrest and, I don't know what to compare it to, but
We have there's custodial and non-custodial. Custodial is where we actually take you into custody. Non-custodial would be, let's say we request a warrant or issue a notice to appear. So we're not actually taking you into custody. You're just getting a summons, or later on you'll be a warrant will be issued for an arrest.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. This is kind of our total uses of forces. Like Captain Feldman said, this past year we had 248. Prior to that, 227, 219. 2020 was 175, and then 2019 was 174. Next slide. Here's our weapon list. You wanted to explain?
Weapon list would be when our officers go hand-on. Maybe it's a wrist lock or joint lock, or we take someone to the ground, that no weapons are involved. It's just hand-to-hand. So that would be anything weaponless.
Pressure, there's pressure points and stuff like that we're trained in to try to get compliance, like you said, a wrist lock and stuff like that. So anytime an officer does that, because a lot of times as we read these, as they come across my desk, I'm reading, and, I always look, first I'm reading for why we were there, and then what escalated at that point, and then sometimes I'll miss it, and I'm like, I got to the end of the report, and there's not, where did it happen at? And then you're like, oh, I to get their hands behind their back, I put a pressure point on them. It's a real simple deal, but still it counts. And so, that gets documented. So weaponless, 2019 had 122. We're down because they had 129. And then in 21, we had 99. 2020, we had 87. And then 2019, there was 99. Next slide. This is our bodyguard. This is our body wrap that we had talked about, for non-compliant. In 2023, we had 59. 2022, we had 63. 21, 47. And 20, we had 29. And then in 19, we had 30. One of the things we've learned too is as we review these cases, we're looking for making sure it was justified, any force we use. But there's times too where we're making sure we're doing things properly according to training. Because as our supervisors review some of these even putting on the body wrap, they may see where the previous officer did it, there's certain straps you got to keep them loose, just they didn't store it properly and it was too tight, and so it caused a delay in trying to get this person in. So we'll talk to officers about that. So we're also not just picking up on, hey, is the force good, is it bad? We also look on training issues that we can address. And one of the things we noticed, I don't know, it's been a while now, we started, when we apply the body wrap, we now put on a spit hood on people, because once you get the wrap on them, it's hard to put the hood on them once done. So now it's just a matter of procedure that we place the spit hood on along with the body wrap. Because we noticed that as officers did it after the fact, they were more susceptible to getting bit and things like that. So that's something we've trained. It's been a while now,
Yes.
probably within the last year, but
Yes.
probably right around a year we've been doing that. Next slide.
How long have we been employing the wrap? And isn't it in a lot of cases to protect the suspect from themselves?
Yes. We've had some sort of wrap. We've on our second type of wrap, a different brand. So we've had it since the 90s. So it's a wonderful tool, because it is, once someone fights, or sometimes you get them in the car and they start banging their head. And so this is a way that they can control. We don't get hurt, they don't get hurt further, or we have to extend our use of force. So it puts them in a position that they can't use their feet, they can't use their hands against us, and that's why we have the spit hood, because really that's the only weapon they're left with.
Next slide. This is a OC, or pepper spray, and so in 23 we had 3, 22 we had 4, 21 1, 20 2, and then 19 2. Pepper spray was really big. I know whenever I was a younger officer, that was kind of the go-to thing. Some issues that come with that is decontamination, because yourself too, because there's a lot of times, you have people, you start spraying, and especially in a hyped up deal, I've seen more officers get sprayed with it than suspects. And so that's kind of why some people shy away from using it. And two, once we do, if we have to have it, because you have to continually monitor the individual that was pepper sprayed, get them medical attention, get their eyes flushed out and everything, and that takes a little bit of time. So I think that's why, and two, since then, the tasers come out and different other tools have come out, so people have gotten away with pepper spray. Next slide.
I actually have a question pertaining to OC and the taser versus, do they fall in the same place in the use of force continuum, or is there an order in which to use those?
OC is less, taser's slightly above OC as it gradually goes up.
Okay. And are you guys using the stream, the foam, or the spray?
We've got several different versions depending on what it is and the canister. Officers carry the spray. They're smaller cans, fit on the belt, but we do have some other ways to dispense it for, let's say, a locked room, or if we actually have a large crowd, we have what's called a projecto-jet that is actually made for more crowd control and a little more controlled when you use it, so there's maybe a little less spray back from wind.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, we had an issue last year, an incident where we had a subject had committed a felony, was hiding up in an attic. And so the supervisor did a good job of getting that. Like I said, it almost looks more like a small fire extinguisher. And they were able to put some OC spray up into the attic, and the person gave up pretty quickly. And that's something you wouldn't be able to achieve that, with the attic space, even on a small house, with a small handheld canister. So that was very beneficial to have that on hand. And this is our use of tasers for display only. This is where, like I said, it was just pointed at the subject, pulled out. 23, we're at 65, 22, 68, 21, we had 53, and 20, I guess.
We did not track that in 20, so 21 was the first year, so that's why they list zeros.
Next slide. And this is for the actual discharge. In 23, we had 26, and 22, 21. In 21, we had 14 uses, and 20, 14 again, and then 19, 16. Next slide. Aspeton, 23, 22, and 21, we had 0, 22, 1, and then 19, 22. This is one of those tools, once again, pepper spray and an asp was the kind of the two go-to, or nightsticks or stuff like that over the time, because of course it's an impact weapon. And so you're relying on you to get it, someone complying with you striking them. And with the invention of the taser, that you can stay more hands off, and also you're not having to strike anybody. And so it's, and it was more effective than, just striking somebody until you get compliance. So that's why you see a big drop in the use of that. Next slide. There's canine usage. 23, we had none. 22, we had 4. 21, 1. 22, and then 19, 22. And canines are seen as an impact weapon. So, next slide. And this is our R1. In 23, we had 1. 22, 21, and 20, we had none. And then 19, we had 1. And this incident, it's very rarely used. One of the things I was impressed with is whenever I got here, so this type of weapon system was, where I came from, only SWAT teams carried it. Well, all of our officers carry these, and it's, it's an impact baton is what it discharges. But, it's got a sighting system and everything on it. And last year, it was a pretty dynamic thing, if I remember. It was, it was at the end of a pursuit, if I remember correctly. The guy got out and wouldn't comply, and I think they were afraid he was going to run in.
They believed that was a domestic situation where he had threatened family members, believed to be armed, and had gotten in 3 or 4 chases.
I think so,
for
yes.
Every time an officer found him. And finally, he stopped, came out, and would not comply, and actually tried to get back into his car. So there was fear that he was reaching for a weapon.
You might go ahead and explain a little bit further what an R1 is for those that aren't familiar.
So it's a kinetic baton, and so it comes out of to explain it, it looks like it's got the round cylinders, that you've seen, and it's a multi-launcher is what it's called. The equivalent of, I've heard it's like getting hit by a 100-mile-an-hour fastball from a major league pitcher is what and so like I said with the weapon system, because our officers had a pretty good standoff on this, and with him diving back into the car, they were able to hit him in one of the areas, and he immediately gave up. So a very effective tool. Like I said, we don't use it all the time, but when we need it, it's there. And and I think too our systems are fairly old. I mean, but we've got a pretty good maintenance system because I believe they come from Canada.
Yes.
The weapon system, and so we've got a team that they maintenance these I think quarterly, and they put a lot into them and everything. And so they work very well. And like I said, when we need them, they're a great tool to have. Next slide. Firearms display. This is just pulling your firearms. This could be on a search warrant, or if someone's not complying. In 23, had 124. 22, we had 101. 21, 106. And 20, 111. And 19, 102. Next slide. Firearms discharge, officer, OIS, officer involved shooting. We had none, all the way back to 20 where we had 1, and then in 19 we had 2. Next slide.
Is any discharge tallied here, or is it just when?
The only discharge, if for some reason we have to put down an animal, we don't track it as a use of force. Only time we track discharge of firearm if it's during a use of force incident, it's against a person. So the only time we don't follow them is when we put down an animal for humanitarian reasons.
What about accidental discharges? We have any of them?
We have not had one for a while.
That's good.
Thank you.
This is an assault and battery of law enforcement officer. In 23, we had 95, 22, 77, 21, 74, and in 2020, we had 44. As Captain Feldman stated, you know, we're seeing an increase of these. Next slide. Now we'll talk about our vehicle pursuits. This is just parts of our pursuit policy. You know, officer may initiate a pursuit of a driver if they avoid to stop or do any type of evasive tactics. Officers have reason to believe the nature of the crime requires immediate pursuit, and the immediate danger to the public created by the pursuit is less than the immediate or potential danger to the public should the suspect remain at large. Next slide. Here's justifications for initiating a pursuit or continuing a pursuit, and they're kind of listed out by little bullet points. Nature of the offense, you know, why are we chasing them? And once a pursuit starts up, you know, as the officer notifies the dispatch what they're that they're chasing a subject and the speeds, supervisors get on there and you know, ask what are your charges? Why are you chasing them? Possibility of identification or apprehension at a later time. Barriers to visibility of police unit, you know, speeds involved, location of the pursuit, you know, if we're in a school area, residential business, you know, highway, you know, there's definitely more leeway if we're out on the interstate. Volume of vehicle traffic, volume of pedestrian traffic, time of day, road conditions, and weather conditions. Next slide. And officers will terminate a pursuit under these conditions if it's up to the officer or the patrol supervisor if they feel like the risk is getting up there, you know, due to, hey, we're coming into the time of day, you know, traffic's going to be picking up, things like that. Weather, road conditions, the officer loses visual contact. There's a clear and unreasonable danger to the officer or the public. Like if, you know, depending on, like I said, all those factors, we take that into account. And the suspect's identity has been established to the point that we can catch him later on, then we'll terminate a pursuit. Next slide. One of the things, you know, we clarified with our policy in this past year is that officers may continue to pursue if they can articulate reasons to show the person is a danger to the public or to the officer involved. Some examples, you know, homicide suspect, bank robbery, felony warrants for person crimes, or other information known to the pursuing officer at the time that would cause the public or their officers to be in danger if the pursuit was terminated. And then this is also why we would terminate. The pursuit's location is no longer, the pursued vehicle's location is no longer known if we lose track of them. And whenever an officer is involved in a personal injury accident or an accident involving another vehicle, it gets terminated. Next slide. Our pursuit review goes through pretty much the same course of action except going through to the IA person. You know, the first line supervisor takes a look at it, the lieutenant takes a look at it, the patrol captain takes a look at it, and then I'll take a look at it and we review, you know, to make sure kind of the same thing we do on use of forces. Are we following policy? You know, because there's times where we follow policy, everything's fine, but there may be some coaching involved where we go, okay, there's nothing wrong with what we did, but maybe next time let's think about this kind of thing, you know, and that's one thing we have to always do, where just because it worked this time doesn't mean it works the next time, and some coaching and ideas for officers to think about in, you know, future if incidents occur. And we do the same thing with these. We do an analysis at the end of the year. If you want to go into that.
Analysis was done by Captain Miller, and his findings was that he believed that the major increase in felony pursuits was based on officers being able to locate felons driving motor vehicles and the ability to be able to continue pursuits, and that the officers using their training, good experience, and good judgment to take more serious offenders off the street. He noted that the majority of pursuits when terminated were by the officers themselves, making good judgment when they felt it was unsafe or it was in best interest of the community to stop. So that was the highest. That was 41% of all use of forces were terminated by the officer, 18% by the supervisor, and usually 41% ended up in arrests. So.
That's one thing I've noticed since being here is our officers are really good at calling off their own pursuits. You know, if they get to a point where, you know, one of those criteria are met, they'll call it off, you know. Supervisors are good, you know, and then there's times, that's why we clarified it in the policy, because some officers had it in their mind that, well, you know, I know the subject, I got to keep letting them run, but a lot of times some of these people, they had felony warrants and things like that for, you know, they assaulted someone, and we're like, those, to me, we need to, that necessitates a little bit more, you know. We still factor in, you know, location, time of day, weather, and everything like that, and we want to keep it safe, but still there's times where, you know, those, especially, you know, they get out on the interstate, we allow them to go a little longer because, you know, speeds are a little higher, depending on the time of day, traffic's a little lighter, you know. A pursuit on our back midnight shift is usually way more safer than any other time just because traffic, and so those may go on a little longer than these others.
Do you track the times? I just wonder what the peak time is for.
It's unpredictable. There's really no way to predict it. It's all based on the subject we're dealing with. But we do track days, all that, and it's you can't guess. So we're just reacting to what's presented to us and when it's presented. A lot of times at night you do see more people willing to be out who have warrants and such because it's dark out. So there's a greater chance in the evenings and on midnight shifts that we do see pursuits.
Okay. And I know we're getting to it later in the presentation, but the flock camera system, is
Yes.
that utilized when you have a pursuit going on?
Less of a pursuit, more of like, let's say the car evades us and we lose it. The flock, if we have the license plate and description, allows, but we actually see it more with stolen vehicles, of it pinpointing where the stolen vehicles are or just we're at, which allows us to get to that area and locate them.
We have had officers use them, though, like after a pursuit, they may lose sight of a suspect, call off the pursuit, but then they know, okay, they were going down this certain road where we happen to have a flock camera. They'll get that reading, and then they may, you know, where other ones in the chain of these cameras set up, know, okay, they're in this area. They'll drive that area, and then we found them again. And so a lot of times if they can get an identity, they can file out of custody charges or stuff like that. So they are using them, but not while it's going on, usually after the fact. Next slide. This is our pursuits since 19. In 23, we had 44, 22, 46, 21, we had 38, and 20, 34, and in 19, we had 25. Next slide. So next we're going to just some crime totals. And on these two, there may be a few variations because these are just by straight numbers, because we may have some outstanding reports that haven't gotten finished up yet, and you know it could increase or decrease one way or the other. But so for larceny or theft offenses in 23, we had 1,264, which was down from the previous year of 1,393. And you can kind of see it kind of dropped from 21, where we were at 1,541, and then in 2020 at 1,577, and then 19, 1,390. Next slide. Burglary in 23, we had 171. In 22, we had 213. And 21, 223, 2020, 209, and in 19, 161. Next slide. Motor vehicle theft. In 23, we had 9, 22, 13, 21, we had 14, and in 20, we had 11, and in 19, we had 13. Next slide. In robbery, in 23, we had 48. 20 we had 29, or 22 we had 29, and 21 we had 21, in 2020 we had 27, and then 2019 we had 30. And some of that too is not just an outright, hey, places are getting robbed. Several of these are domestic situations where, you know, my spouse were having a domestic and I take her phone from her, you know, or she takes the phone from me. So that goes on, it gets categorized as a robbery. Next slide. Weapons law violation. In 23, we had 57. 2022, we had 76. 2021, we had 78. 2020, 77. 2019, 60. Next slide. Homicides. In 2023, we had 2. In 22, we had 4. 21, 3. 2020, we had 0. In 2019, we had 2. Next slide. Here's some information on our flock. So we had 14 cameras installed in April of 23. The next 7 were installed at different times in 2023. Because some of them, depending on where we put them at, we have to get permission through KDOT and things like that, and that takes a little bit of time. And so we still have 1 camera that needs to be installed. Currently we have a total of 22 fixed cameras, and then we have 2 battery operated ones that we can move around to different locations that we may have a need for that, and the others are hardwired. Next slide. Here's our camera. Usually, like I said, we started using this in April. Arrests made based off of that, 37, stolen property recovered in 10 different cases. Assisted clearing our cases 15 times. Assisted clearing other agency cases 9 times. Drug seized cases is 9. Gun seized 1 case. Vehicles recovered 5. And a total of property has been recovered from the use of these cameras is $114,000. And so, and that's where, you know, as things are stolen or anything, the amount gets put into the system, and that's where that comes from. And so that has been, there's also a lot of cases where they've assisted, but they haven't directly made a deal. You know, we had a deal just the other day where we had a guy passing some forged checks, and so they didn't have a tag number. All they had was just a vehicle description. Officers were able to put the description in and catch a vehicle with just like, you know, even just the sticker on the bumper, was able to notice that was in the area and pin it down to a certain person and identify that person. Was able to clear a lot of cases just through police work. So it's being used in a lot of different ways. It seems like weekly we've got officers using the system.
Were they going to be installed in patrol cars as well? We're looking at 2 because we were notified last year of a grant that we'll be able to get some additional ones, and we were looking with that to get some mobile ones. Because we used to have some, I think, years ago,
Yes.
a different brand, and I think there's maybe some issues that worked with that.
Yeah, and our Axon car cameras are supposed to be able to integrate with the flock system too.
So, next slide. Is there any questions?
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but you might touch on the Law Enforcement Citizen Review Board and just kind of that process and when we meet and what they have, what their role is, I guess.
Yeah, so the Citizens Review Board, we meet quarterly, and if we have any type of, you know, bias-based policing complaint or excessive use of force complaint, we present that to them. And you've actually been through the system, through this process, if you want to explain how that goes.
So anytime we get those complaints, and an investigation will be done on our end prior to making the final decision. After the chief reviews it, we present that to the board. The case, they get to see the body cameras, and then they're free to ask questions, and this is all done in executive session just based on the fact that it's personnel issues. Upon that, they make a decision based on if they agree with the findings of the police department or not. And we've done, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 over the last 2 years, and we've all come to the same conclusion on those. So, and we also present information on policies and procedures and work closely with them to develop better relations with their community.
And I think too, much like we do with the commission, is we present them with a lot of the stuff we use. You know, I think they get, they've had reviews of the RAP,
Yep.
Different things. You know, one of the last meetings we had did kind of give them a synopsis of our bias-based policing and things like that. Kind of let them know on those areas that they seem to focus on in their roles, kind of what we're putting out to officers.
In the past, something I wanted to bring up with you is trying to make an effort to bring back the Citizen Law Enforcement Academy. And I know in the past that was a recommendation for those sitting on that review board that they participate in that. Is there any way we can, I know it's a joint effort between the city and the police department, sheriff's office,
Yeah.
but
And
has
that's
that been
one of our
talked about, bringing that?
No, that's one
trying
of
to
our goals
reinstate
for
that?
this year, is getting that going back out, you know, because it's a piece of community outreach too, because you get people kind of understanding but also interacting with our officers. And so we had talked about, we're going to get that up and going this year. And I think you're right. I think if the people on the board have the time to go through it, I think it would be great for them to kind of experience, and then they kind of have, as these things come up, you know, we may not necessarily have to explain some of the here's why we do what we do, because they've already had, you know, some experience with it.
I'm a graduate of the academy, so I.
I did have a question pertaining to the pursuit. I guess get a little bit more detailed. Is the pit maneuver still something that's in our utility belt, or is that a no-go?
We've never used it. That's KHP is trained in that. We don't do the pit, and we don't do roadblocks or box anybody in. It's too dangerous. So,
Spike strips, though,
Yes.
we're using those?
yes.
Yeah, the pit maneuver, you know, it's one of where I came from is called tactical vehicle intervention. Same thing, you know, I think it's a copyright thing, but it's useful. It's one of those things you have to train on every time, and I think too with our vehicles and the way they're set up, you're going to knock a car out of service if you do it, because what I've seen, you got to have the wraparound bumpers, you know, kind of like a Dodge Charger they have, because you can use it and get up closer to the car. If you do it right and tap it, there's no damage to your car. Maybe a scuff up on the push bumper, but with our cars, we have such a shallow bumper. It, like I said, you can do it, but you're going to lose probably a quarter panel or something. So that's something you got to weigh out too. But more than anything is the training. It's something you got to repetitively train on and everything. But you risk damaging vehicles, and it's one of those deals where, and two, if we've got an agency here close that will use it, and you know they'll use it effectively, that's nice. That's like second best to being able to do it.
Wreck their cars, huh?
I didn't say that, but
Do you track the number of times you deploy the spikes?
Yeah, they are included on that, and I don't know if he has it in here, or
I don't think I remember reading that.
I don't remember it either. I am not seeing it in his report.
I don't remember if we did it. It may have been once last year.
That it was effective. It's just, the hard part is they have to get far enough in advance of the chase and knowing that they're going to come that way. And usually they're turning up, the people we're pursuing are making right and left turns, so it's really difficult unless it's a straight road and they can get well in advance, because they have to get it out of the back, deploy it, make sure it's safe, because that's actually one of the most dangerous portions of a pursuit is someone putting out spikes. being out of their car. Usually they get it out and the pursuit has just gone by, so they can't initially deploy them.
Are all of our units equipped with spikes?
All our units are deployed with the exact same thing. Each one has the same, so anybody can get in that car and know where it is. So they're all with the R-Wins, the spikes, all that.
And there's some other
You should
things.
have brought an R1 to, I don't think everyone gets what the R1 is.
Yeah, we can do
It's
that
really
next
cool.
time. And two, there's other things on the market we're looking at. We're looking at getting some training and evaluation on, there's different things for, stopping vehicles that we've got in the works to take a look at and stuff, because there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's no catch-all, especially even the spike strips. Like you said, they're very dangerous. They're very effective. I've seen them stop many a suspect car. I've seen them stop many a police car. And so you got to be able to get them out of the road. Once you use them. So there's other things, like I said, we're taking looks at it. So hopefully it will give us just another tool in the toolbox.
You touched on accreditation, and I have to say I've been impressed with the thoroughness of accreditation, the paces it puts us through, the transparency of us having our policies available online, as well as then kind of that proactive policy review and development. But if you have anything to add about accreditation, that's where a lot of some of our policy language and approach comes from.
Now, where I came from, because CALIA is a big deal. It really is. Being CALIA accredited it takes a lot to get there, and it takes a lot to keep it. The state I come from, I think there's 3 agencies that are CALIA accredited, and here in Kansas it seems to be very important. There's more, but where I came from is a state accredited, and it wasn't pushed down the reasons of what accreditation mean. We were able to go to a conference in November, and it was really eye-opening, the work that they do. And just to kind of sum it up, so they're watching best practices across the country, and so they put it into their standards. Hey, and I think during in 2020 is justice reform was coming up. They were kind of ahead of the curve as far as making sure cities were meeting certain standards. And so that takes the load off us. Like, I was explaining, we just got a new accreditation manager today that, if we didn't have CALIA, it would be our job every day to come in and search across, hey, what's going on? What kind of rulings are coming out of the Supreme Court that we need to try to get involved? But that takes the pressure off of it, because it's like a clearinghouse of here's what you need to do. You stay within it. And so it is, like I said, it takes a lot to get there, but once you get it, it's a feather in your cap, but it's something you got to work hard. But it's kind of takes a big workload off of us as administrators, or we're not having to Google search, new rulings and all that kind of stuff, because, CALIA is on the ball on that. So, like I said, it's prestigious to have it. It's prestigious to keep it, but it's very important, I think, for departments and cities to have.
And when will the recertification?
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
They'll be doing on-site, yes. And then after that, I think we go to, I think in July, they have what they call hearings, where you'll already known what kind of their final report was. So we already had our off-site where at the end of last month, where they remote in and they check your policies and everything, and they randomly check them to make sure they fit. And it's not just saying you have to have proofs too. Like you say, we do a certain thing, so the accreditation person is putting proofs of that. Either may put video, they may put pictures, they may put copies of reports to show that we are, meeting these standards, and they check all that. And so thanks to our accreditation manager, we've passed that with flying colors. And then, like I said, our on-site will be in 2 weeks, where they'll be here for, I think it's 3 or 4 days. And then we'll go in July to where they have hearings. They ask you some questions and stuff, and then if everything goes well, you get recertified then, or reaccredited.
Yeah, one of the most telling things on this information was the fact that our total officer applications has dropped from 224 in 2019 to 99, which, and I noticed that, when you look at our staffing, we're at about 85% fully staffed. I'm guessing that this is still continues to be a national issue, and we're not alone. I guess if anything else, I want to hear that we're not out there alone. But I know at one point the Highway Patrol in the state of Kansas was short a significant number of officers also.
Yes, I have the ability to, I speak with a lot of recruiters, and everybody's in the same boat. The number of applications is down overall, and then from those applications, the number of qualified people putting in those applications are even less. So you have a lot of agencies across the state competing for just a handful of qualified applicants.
So
Are a majority of our new officers actually new officers, or do we ever look at going out and trying to get officers from smaller communities? I know we've done a pay plan study that, we tried to increase our salaries. Has that helped any at maybe luring some officers in from
I
other
was just
communities?
getting ready to give them permission to speak freely about the bidding war that we find ourselves in law enforcement.
That's kind of the toughest one, is when you get certified officers to come in. We don't get a lot because they look at the money, but also we have to make sure they're not running from something and we're taking someone else's problems, which happens quite often. So finding qualified people, and with the fact that we're in the center of Kansas, is not the greatest recruiting tool, especially if you're competing with Kansas City, Topeka, or Wichita, the bigger cities. So we do advertise that we pay extra for lateral transfers. We get some here and there. It just depends on what they're looking for, and who they are is something that we have to take into great account, and why they're coming here.
Thank
But
you.
like you said, the bidding war it's real, and I think too, places will, they'll, hey, what are y'all paying? We get calls like that, and then so they pay more than us, and so I think that's something for us, for our police department. We're going to have to always keep monitor and adjust, because I think we've fallen behind in some areas around here, and so. And that's going to be the deal. I think that's, especially with law enforcement, because it's so hard to get people in. I think you got, like I said, people will go, well, they're paying that, we'll give $1 or something more,
Well, it's no different than anything else. It's a supply and demand formula, whether it's employment or whatever, that is going to drive those numbers.
I mean, because, the pool of people that want to go into law enforcement is dramatically dropped off. Where I come from, they would only run an academy when they were going to, maybe hire 12, and they would get 200 something plus applicants at that time. I was told on their last recent one, they got about 100-ish, and 40 were usable, I mean, you got some people, with some gun felonies going, hey, I'll try this out. And, and I guess they're not that desperate. They turned them down. So, but, it's just one of those things. It's a real issue. 2020 really made a lot of people go, man, I could go and not catch as much flack, doing this or that. And so you're also battling that too. So.
Has any of the industry experts identified what it's going to take to turn that around? Is there an answer?
No,
No.
you read stuff. I mean, there's guesses. There's, and I think too, but departments too. I think because you got to work. Retention is just as important, because if you don't take care of the people you bring in, why bring them in, So I think that is equally as important. And I think a lot of police departments don't do a good job at taking care of their people, and that's kind of universal. It's a lot of what I've experienced is, it blows my mind, but I think maybe in these times, agencies are needing to go, okay, maybe I need to treat people a little better, manage them, supervise them better, and stuff like that. Because, like I said, if you don't get rid of them all, you don't have to fill all these spots.
What is our, I guess, retention rate, or do we keep those type of?
We haven't pulled those numbers that I know. Since I've been here, I don't know that we've, and like last year, right off my head, I'm just guessing, we had some retirements. We had an officer that didn't make it out of the FTO program. We had one finish the academy and didn't even start the FTO program, and go, I decided this isn't for me,
Do we pay for, if someone comes to us, do we pay for the academy? Or is that,
Well, it's,
Other than our salary.
yeah, taxes through the state of Kansas actually pay for Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. So we don't technically pay for it. You get paid while you're going because you have to be hired and sponsored by an agency. But it's through taxes through the state that provides that funding.
And how long is the academy now?
16 weeks. So,
You might speak to the FTO program while we're on the topic.
And it's another, so you get out of the academy and then you ride each shift. You're going to ride a month with a different field training officer. They're going to grade and evaluate you, and that's always the most stressful part of becoming a cop. The academy's one thing, you get in it, and I've seen people where when they get out, they're like, man, I've got this job figured out. Well, you got it figured out until you real life, because in the academy you're going over handcuffing one day, you're going over this. Well, you're out in the FTO program, you got to put all that together. And so it's a stressful thing. I remember the first night when I got in a patrol car by myself, it was probably one of the greatest nights of my life because, you get graded on everything, the way you dress, the way you talk to people, the way you write a report, your officer safety. If I got a house I'm pulling up to on a call and I drive by it, you get dinged for that because it's an officer safety violation, And so that first night when you shoot by that house, you panic and you go, oh, well, it's okay because I'm not getting graded. So that is the biggest stress that you hear from officers. But so they ride a month with a different FTO for the 3 shifts, and then they have a final phase where they get graded, and it's a step down. So it's an 80-20 work. The first phase where your FTO is doing about 80% of the work and you're doing about 20. You're there, you're observing. Second phase is supposed to be about a 50-50, and you're doing 50% of the work, and then your FTO is doing about 50% of the work. But you're really only considered one person, And then when you go to third phase, it's 80-20 again, but you're doing 80% of the work and your FTO is doing 20. And then your final phase which is 2 weeks of evaluating, making sure you can operate as a solo officer. That person's supposed to be more of a ghost, where they're just there to keep you safe, and you're supposed to be able to handle everything and not ask them questions like you're a solo officer. And so you got, like I said, you got the month on each shift, the 3 shifts, and then you've got the 2 weeks of your final phase.
Is there a brief update on the mental health ride-along program, where that stands now?
So I think we actually, it's coming to the council tonight.
Yeah, we have an amendment to the agreement on the agenda tonight, but you might explain just kind of what the program is and what our experience has been.
Yeah, so they've, by state law, you can have to fulfill that position, you can have a step down than what we were originally requiring. And so we've got one right now. And we kind of started hitting our stride after the new year into, our mental health person was, on maternity leave, and they come back. And so they get to where they go, and they, I think she went out on a suicidal person, barricaded person. This was a little after the first year, and she was able to talk that person out, and just with some of her skills, along with some of our negotiators. So, and we're kind of learning our way, but I think we're figuring out where they go, and as they get opportunities to go follow up on some of our people, in the community that need some of these resources, where they can follow up or refer them to, because that's been a big piece, is her connection to these outside resources, these people that can come and do these follow-ups, because our officer and her, they're usually busy in progress type stuff, or at least, and so, but they can make sure people are on this list of people to go get checked on. So it's working. If we can get another one in, that is really going to give us some more. Hopefully, like I said, we're kind of figuring it out what fits best for our community. But like I said, if we can make that adjustment, I think that will really help us get our second person.
Thank you.
Back to that field training. What is the time frame from going through that final testing to the person going to the academy, field training, and being on patrol on their own?
about a year to get from the start of the academy to they're out on their own. It's pretty much a year. because you got 4 months in the academy, 4 months in field training. So it takes about a year to get them finally out on their own. So it's a good investment.
As we can hire, we've recently hired a couple of former officers that have come back to us. That is a tremendous home run for us because, we were able to do a modified FTO program because we know they've already been through one, and so we're able to get them out quicker. So certified officers, it speeds up the timeline quite a bit.
Anything else?
Actually, I've got one question. I'm gonna, I guess, put you on the spot and ask that you put us on the spot. In the sense of, as a governing body, what do you feel like we could do best for you in terms of that hiring issue?
I think if we need to take a hard look at officer pay, and that's the biggest thing, and we need to, we can work on bringing some numbers forward, surrounding departments and stuff, but I think that's going to be a big thing, is because what I have seen work is like a step system, like as far as because I think some people, if they see, hey, in 9 years, I'll reach this pay, this topped out system, that keeps people around longer. And that's what I've seen where I came from is, people know this is what I'm going to make at this point in time. And usually about that 10-year period too is where you get people, they'll probably, they hit 10, they're probably going to stick around and maybe hit the 15, for the retirement system, and then that 20. So there's a lot of things we can look at, but I think we definitely need to, that's probably our biggest area right now where we're kind of falling behind.
Thank you.
So do we have active recruiting going on, like, building a football team?
Yeah, we always do. Next month, I'm going to Hayes. Hayes has been, the thing around here is looking at the colleges around here, or when you talk military, Fort Riley's their best option when it comes to military because they're familiar with central Kansas. Go to McConnell, they're used to Wichita. They don't even know where Salina is. You go to Topeka, they don't know where Salina is. So we focus on like KW, great school. They have a very good criminal justice program. We've got great relationship with them. We actually have 2 of our evidence techs who are assisting with a class there. We go regularly and talk with the criminal justice class. We're going out to Fort Hays next month for their criminal justice career fair. So we're always recruiting. Last year we did an open house for the colleges. We sent out flyers to pretty much every college we could think of in Kansas, inviting them to the open house to the training center. It was last minute. We're hoping to have a little more planning this year and get some people in. We did get one from that. We been averaging 1 to 2 from Fort Hays every year, a couple from KW every year. So we try to focus on the people that know the area and are wanting to stay and like this area. That's usually our best bet.
I think that open house, aren't we planning April-ish?
Yes.
To try to get them before they, graduation time, and hopefully they make some plans. And we, like I said, we're very open to any recruitment ideas from our officers. The idea, I got to give a shout out to my wife. It was her idea for that open house last year. One night she goes, hey, why don't you do this? And so I came to a meeting. I said, hey, why don't we do this? And then like the next week, they're, hey, we got a plan for next weekend. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so like you said, we threw it together, but we got a hire out of it. And so that's what I told him. I go, that's success. If we can get a hire out of this. And 2, we opened it up to the public, where the public was able to come in, and saw several of y'all there come and see what we do and stuff like that. That was very beneficial too. But like I said, if we could get one, and we did. And so, but like I said, we're going to try to get a little bit more notice out this time. So.
Anything else? Well, thank you, Chief Wise and Captain Fieldman. Keep up the good work, and appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
We'll be back here at 4 o'clock for the regular scheduled meeting. Welcome. I'll call the regular meeting of the Salina City Commission for February 12th, 2024 to order. May we have a roll call, please?
First, you need to verify that the Open Meeting Act has been met,
I'm sorry.
which it has.
We have confirmation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act properly notified.
Mayor Longvine,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Ivy,
Here.
Commissioner Lenkowitz.
Here.
Thank you. All who are willing and able, please stand, remove your hats for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That will bring us to awards and proclamations.
All right, item 3.1 is recognition of the week of February 18th through February 24th, 2024 as Engineers Week. Libby Lawrenson, PE, President of the Smoky Valley Chapter of Professional Engineers, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon. I'm to read the proclamation of the City of Salina, Kansas. Whereas George Washington, the first President of the United States and founding father of our nation, was a distinguished military and agricultural engineer, as well as an excellent surveyor, and whereas engineers have used their scientific knowledge and technical skills in creative and innovative ways to improve the quality of life and fulfill society's needs, and whereas engineers are encouraging our young math and science students to realize the practical power of their knowledge by sponsoring programs such as the Future City Competition and Math Counts, and whereas engineers adhere to a strong code of ethics and standards of conduct promoting personal accountability, ethical decision-making, and quality work, such that citizens will look to engineers for their knowledge and skills to meet the challenges of the future, and whereas this year's theme for the event is Welcome to the Future, and it is appropriate to recognize engineers' countless accomplishments and contributions during the week we celebrate George Washington's birthday. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Bill Longvine, Mayor of the City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the week of February 18th through the February 24th, 2024 as Engineers Week in the City of Salina, Kansas, and call this observation to the attention of our citizens for the contributions to our health, safety, and welfare by engineers in our community and beyond. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Salina, Kansas, to be affixed this 12th day of February, 2024.
Thank you. And I would take a wild guess that you're an engineer with Berkamp and Company?
I am, sir, yeah.
What kind of engineering do you do?
I'm a product engineer. I work on our current product line in our manufacturing facility. Everything from custom designs by our customers' requests to troubleshooting issues in our factory.
Okay. Well, I've had the privilege and opportunity to see some of George Washington's engineering at Mount Vernon firsthand, and something everyone should see. So do you have events planned for the week?
We do. I have 3 events I'd like to share with you all today. Just this past Saturday, February 10th, we held our Math Counts competition. It's a math contest for 6th through 8th graders that provides math problems in a competition setting to encourage confidence and improve attitudes towards math and problem solving in middle school students. That was February 10th. Now, coming up soon on February 20th, the Smoky Valley chapter of the Kansas Society of Professional Engineers, we're hosting our awards dinner, where we will be honoring individuals for their achievements in engineering and for reflecting a positive image of the profession. And then the third event I'd like to bring to everyone's attention, it's not actually hosted by our chapter, but it is hosted by the Salina Public Library, and it's celebrating Salina Women in STEM on February 22nd, which actually also happens to be Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day. And we'd like to encourage everyone, especially middle school and high school girls, to attend for an evening of learning from, conversing with, and honoring women in our community with careers in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds like a lot going on. So come up for. He's gonna get your picture. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I might add here, I just saw him walk in. Our city engineer, Dan Stack, is concluding his last week with the city, so he will be missed. That will lead us to public hearings.
Item 4.1, Salina Baseball Enterprises Agreement Amendment, which has 4 action items today. 4.1A is to conduct a public hearing confirming the naming initiatives brought forth by Salina Baseball Enterprises for 2 facilities located at Berkley Family Recreational Area. Item 4.1B is to consider the approval of resolution number 24-8188, ratifying the honorary naming of the field known as Tower Field as Roger Wilbur Field, and for the philanthropic naming of the field currently named Roger Wilbur Field as Pestinger Family Stadium, subject to the precondition of the certification of available funding for Phase 1 renovations to the current Roger Wilbur Field in accordance with the municipal facility naming guidelines. Item 4.1C, authorize the mayor to execute a First Amendment to the October 9th, 2023 agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises relating to Wilbur Field and James Matson Field. And item 4.1D, which is a late addition, is to authorize the city manager to execute a facility use agreement between the city of Salina and USD 305 regarding the use of Pestinger Family Stadium.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing. Mr. Hammond.
Good afternoon, Mayor Longvine, Commissioners. Jeff Hammond, Director of Parks and Recreation, providing you with four items for your consideration today. To summarize what the city clerk said, we're conducting the public hearing, considering a resolution 24-8188 for the naming initiative for Wilbur Field and Tower Field based on a certification of funds for Phase 1 of renovations to Wilbur Field. Number 3, consideration of amendment to the agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises related to renovations to Wilbur Field, reflecting a phased approach and the certification of funds. And lastly, a consideration for the city manager to enter into a facility use agreement with USD 305 relating to the renovated field. You've been provided previously. You've been provided a previously approved Resolution 23-8156 on October 9th, 2023, where the governing body previously considered this naming initiative. The resolution for the naming was conditional upon the certification of funds as related to the Wilbur Field agreement for Salina Baseball Enterprises. On approximately January 10th of this month, 2024, this year, 2024, Salina Baseball Enterprises approached the city staff requesting a different approach based on the current fundraising efforts for the Wilbur Field project and to be allowed to enter into various contracts to start work. The phased approach to renovations is attached as an Exhibit D to the red line amendment to the agreement in the packet. There's also a clean version of that amendment. To summarize the phased approach to the renovation of Wilbur Field, Phase 1 is the site work, civil work, stadium utilities, playing field work, including turf fields, field lighting at Dean Evans and Wilbur Field, bullpens, project fencing. Phase 2, which was initially Phase 2 and Phase 3 got switched around in the documents that came out on Friday. However, Phase 2 is a hitting cage. Phase 3 is the grandstand with elevated seating and press box. And Phase 4 was a potential improvements to Matson Field pending funding. The different phased approach that is a deviation from the previously considered approach requires a reconsideration of the naming initiatives and an amendment to the agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises. The city's guidelines for naming municipal facilities established in 2006 and amended in 2017 outlines a five-step process. The municipal naming guidelines are provided in your packet. An outline of the steps as related to today's item. Step 1, August of 2019, all areas of Berkley Family Recreational Area were designated as a qualified facility for naming. Step 2, the naming applications for what is currently known as Wilbur Field was requested to be Pestinger Family Stadium, and the field currently known as Tower Field was requested to become Wilbur Field. Both applications were submitted to the city clerk in August of 2023, and they were also verified by the city clerk. Step 3 happened this year in January 31st of 2024. The Parks and Rec Advisory Board considered whether the revised phased approach was consistent with or an acceptable deviation from their initial recommendation. The board voted to recommend to the City Commission that the revised approach was in fact consistent with their initial recommendation. And step 4 is to conduct the public hearing to consider the naming initiative and its merits and review supporting documentation, which are in your packet as it was last year when we went before you then. Additionally, the City Commission shall take action regarding the initiative or whether that be approve, postpone, amend, or vote to deny. And then step 5, the last part of the naming guidelines is to approve a signage plan, funding plan, and the use of staff resources. As I stated previously, there is a red line version and a clean version of the amendment with the attachment or with the Exhibit D for the agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises. A summary of the amendments to the agreement is provided. I'll quickly go through those. There's a reference to Exhibit D showing the phased approach, a breakout of the proposed phasing of the project, an updated table of city-funded elements for Phase 1, an explanation of the future phases and the funding ratio of 70% Salina Baseball Enterprises and 30% the City of Salina, which is subject to a cap on city funding for renovations in the amount of $1 million. Also, the city manager approval of the final scope of work. A description of Baseball Enterprises' commitment of $1,544,000 towards Phase 1. A modification of Baseball Enterprises' required certification of funding for Phase 1, and updated language regarding funding certification requirements for future phases. The last item for consideration is for the authorization for the city manager to enter into a facility use agreement with USD 305 for the school use of the future Pestinger Family Stadium. The school district has a need for documentation with the city as a basis for their participation in contributing funds to the project as part of Salina Baseball Enterprises fundraising. Fiscal note, as I said before, when I presented before the commission on this matter last year, park signage would be updated by city staff relating to the names changes for the current Wilbur Field and the current Tower Field. We would include those changes, those sign changes that are existing signs. We would change those out. Additionally, the cost of the Phase 1 project total is $2,245,720, which the city share of that Phase 1 is $700,836. The remaining costs of Pestinger Family Stadium project and the new Wilbur Field project, formerly Tower Field, are currently estimated to be $445,339, and that would be the 30% match of the city. the 30% match to the city of those additional phases is $133,602. Actions for today. Got three. We have the first one. We have the public hearing. Second phase or second action is consider resolution 24-8188 for the honorary naming of the field known as Tower Field as Roger Wilbur Field, and for the philanthropic naming of Roger Wilbur Field as Pestinger Family Stadium, subject to the precondition of the certification of funds for Phase 1 renovations. Options identified for the City Commission consideration include improving the resolution, approve the resolution with amendments as City Commission deems appropriate, postpone this action, or do not approve the resolution. Staff recommends option number 1. Third item, consider authorizing the mayor to execute the attached updated agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises relating to Wilbur Field and James Matson Field. Options identified there, similar to the other second item, approving the mayor to execute the agreement, approve with amendments as the City Commission deems appropriate, postpone or not to approve the amendment to the current agreement. Staff recommends option number 1. And last item, number 4, consider authorizing the city manager to enter into a facility use agreement with USD 305 regarding the Pestinger Family Stadium, formerly called Wilbur Field. Options are similar for that item to approving the city manager to enter into the agreement with USD 305, approve that with amendments as the City Commission deems appropriate, postpone or to not approve the facility use agreement. Staff recommends option number 1 for that item. I'll make myself available for any questions that you might have. Also, Kenny Hancock is here with Salina Baseball Enterprises, and he's willing to answer any questions that you may have as well.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, are we dealing with each one of these separately, or because for me, the first one's easy. My questions are later, and they don't affect how I feel about the first part of it. Sorry.
So, yeah, I think we're in the public hearing stage, so it's an opportunity for you to ask questions about any of those items, and then take public comment. Then it'll come back to you as the governing body, and you can follow up further on any particular individual item. But it'd be totally appropriate to ask whatever level of questions you have at this point.
All right. Tell me if I have this wrong. The amendment, it's section 2.1.1. Is the city being asked to, because it looks like in that phase 1, a lot of these were considered city parts of the project. Does that mean the city is going to perform the project, we're going to bid it out, or are we just contributing parts of the money towards whoever is going to actually do the work? And the reason I'm asking is, if we're being asked to put our money in up front for those projects, then that's not the same as truly sharing the cost 70-30. I mean, if we have to phase it, great, but our money would be phased just the same as Baseball Enterprises' money would be phased. So.
Sure. So we're not bidding it out separately. We are sharing that funding. We carved out those items because you may recall the agreement also contemplates if there's funding shortfall or an overage. So we tried to identify the elements that we were targeting city funds to go towards, both somewhat philosophically to demonstrate our contributions doing kind of the more basic improvements, and Baseball Enterprises funding is going to improvements beyond what might be a city responsibility. But then additionally, if there were any funding shortfalls, we tried to address that. So in answer to your question, we're still in a proportional allocation towards those items in coordination with Baseball Enterprises. We tried to carve out the proportional share attributable to what is now Phase 1, which is that 700,000 number, a lesser number, and then the amount that would be our proportional share of future phases when those come along. So I don't know if I answered your question
Is
very
it
well, but
disproportionate amount of our money coming in early?
no,
for phase-
I really don't think so. We're keeping the same proportion. We're agreeing on what is phase one, and then we are contributing towards our share of phase one, essentially in the same proportion.
Okay, so we would be writing a check to whichever account is overseeing all this. So we're not actually writing a check just for, let's say, stadium utilities. We just put the money in and
Right. There's
whoever's
actually,
overseeing is writing the check for building utilities?
and Jeff may be able to speak to the invoicing and documentation process, but we receive proof of the work and the invoice, and then we make payment.
The engineer, the architect engineer that is helping do the construction administration along with Salina Baseball Enterprises verifies the work is complete, sends a stamped authorization as a request for payment for that item. And then we would process that portion, whether it be a deposit on the front end or a full amount on the back end. I'm not sure what that looks like exactly, depending on the contractor, I would imagine. Yeah, that's what's.
So if the bill for the utilities, I'll make the math easy for me, was 15,000, we would then write a check for 4,500, or we would, which would be 30% of that, or would we be writing a check for that whole amount because it was a city project?
Right. So, and maybe answering this indirectly, but I think you're also kind of getting to the reason why we're wanting certification of funds from SBE at the same time. So we know between us and SBE, there's the full amount of funds available to cover the costs associated with phase one. But then we'd get invoiced proportionally, and we'd pay our share as these items become due.
But again, our share is 30% of whatever the bill is, or we're going to pay for these particular projects in total just because?
I think we pay for these projects, and so our 70% is paying for these, because this is what we carved out. So if you look in there, and I'm looking to Mr. Hancock over there, but we're paying no part of the turf. That is part of the expense to Salina Baseball Enterprises. So we're not paying 30% of the turf. Does that make sense? They're paying 100% of that.
I may understand, it may not make sense, but I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, so the whole thing is I think we've agreed to pay 30% up to $1 million. So whatever they raise, we're paying 30%. But we've carved out certain things that we feel like are a city's responsibility when it comes to like the lighting and the fencing and stuff that we can.
And I think we have history here. An example would be the renovation of Dean Evans Stadium.
Oh, yeah, and I no problem with that. I just want to know how the money's coming out, 30% equally among, 70-30 equally among the two parties as we go along in however many phases we want, or is a lot of our 30% being used up early?
Mr. Hancock.
Hi, Kenny Hancock. I don't know if I'm going to muddy the waters or add some clarification, but as an example, and Mike did a good job of explaining it. For instance, the turf is 100% going to be paid for by Salina Baseball. And if we get a bill, once we get started on the project and we get an initial bill for mobilization, and they start doing some work, let's just say it's $350,000. You won't pay 30% of that. We pay 100% of that. All of that is going to be on our side of the ledger. If you get a bill for $15,000, or a bill comes in for utilities and it's $15,000 to use your figure, that is 100% yours. We don't pay any of your costs, and you don't pay any of our costs. But at the end of the day, you will have paid no more than 30% of the cost of the project, and we will pay 70% or more of the project.
And you may have hit on the issue I was going to. What happens when it looks like we're going to be in for more than 30%.
Well, here's the good news. We have bid the turf, we have bid the fencing, and we have bid the lighting. That's roughly 75% of the project, and we are $400,000 under budget right now. So the chances of us coming in over budget now are asymptotically close to zero. It's a tough conversation if we were $400,000 over at this point and we're really hoping for some good prices. We've already got the great prices and the contracts are ready to be signed. So the chances of that happening are almost zero, but there's a lot of language in the development agreement that addresses that in case it does happen. Like if we were to bid some more items that you're going to be paying for, that you've identified that you want to be responsible for, and those come in over the budget, and we have a little extra money because it came in under the budget on our items, we end up kicking into your pot, and vice versa. We are unlimited in how much we will kick in. You're limited to $1 million at the maximum.
Oh, and I'm greatly appreciative of what you're putting in.
I know you are.
Because that's money we don't have to spend.
I know you are. I know you are.
But also just want to know what our protection against an overdraft on our part is.
Sure. No, and it's a good question. I think it's if you're having trouble sleeping, get the development agreement and read those elements in it. It will put you to sleep. Believe me, it's exhaustively covered.
Or keep you up all night trying to look up all the terms.
the other
Right.
way. Right.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Is there any further questions for Mr. Hammond? Questions for Mr. Hancock? Any commissioner comments? Mr. Bingston.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, you all may be too polite to ask why you have a red line of a red line. I thought I might explain briefly. The initial red line that was in the packet was to show the changes from the original agreement, section by section. It wasn't the original plan, but Mr. Hancock received that document about the same time you all did. He and I spoke on Thursday evening, right when the packet went out. I explained the circumstances, and he was kind enough to reply the next day, well, I guess that evening, actually, which I appreciated very much. That's what led to the follow-up red line, and it really just boiled down to responding to Salina Baseball's request that second and third phase be reversed. And that's the essence of why you have that second red line. That's what brought us to the proposed final version. But that's how that transpired.
Thank you. I don't know if this is appropriate time. I might ask city manager if this would be a good time to share my idea about the water tower.
That won't, well, I didn't anticipate that being baseball enterprises project. That'll be a standalone item.
Well, if anyone wants to know my idea, come ask me after the meeting. Is there any public comment?
And so, I'm sorry if I may, I struggled to find the wording that I was looking for, but Section 2.1.2 is the payment process for city elements. Applications for payment certified by the architect and approved by the city and baseball enterprises for work performed
Your
on...
microphone.
Oops, sorry. I'll start all the way over. I apologize. I was struggling to find this section of the agreement, but I think it's in response to Commissioner Davis's question. And it's Section 2.1.2. Payment process for city elements. Applications for payment certified by the architect and approved by the city and baseball enterprises for work performed on the city elements of the Wilbur Field project scope shall be paid directly to the contractor by the city pursuant to the following process. and provides for application for payment not later than the 20th of the month. The architect's able to certify the application for payment and submit the application for payment to the city and Baseball Enterprises. By the following 25th of the month, the city shall make payment of the certified and approved amount to the contractor not later than the 20th of the following month. If an application for payment is received by the architect after the date fixed above, the architect is able to certify and within 5 business days, the city shall make payment of the certified and approved amount to the contractor not later than the 20 days after the architect submits the certified application for payment to the city and Baseball Enterprises. So, city elements, architectural review, Baseball Enterprises review, submission to the city, we then review and approve and process payment. So that's our backstop, no pun intended, towards our payments going towards our elements.
So I could have stayed up all night and still missed it.
Well, I struggled to find it. I had to dive into our file system to get my hands on it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You care to follow up on that, Mr. Hancock?
No, he captured it right. It's
Okay.
really exhaustive, like I said earlier. And it's very detailed, and it's pretty hard to not stay in your lane with the wording that's in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now we'll have public comment. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and state your name.
Hi, my name is Mark Lapis. Now, just a curious question about the facility use agreement. How much is actually USD 305 going to give for this project in addition to, or is it separate than the $1 million that the city's promised in this project? It was just the wording earlier. I just asked for clarification.
We'll be getting to that in item D. Any further public comment? I will close the public hearing and bring it back to consider resolutions number 24-8188.
Mayor Longbine, I move we approve resolution number 24-8188.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 24-8188. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And that brings us to items 4.1.c.
So item 4.1C was to authorize the mayor to execute a First Amendment to the October 9th, 2023 agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises relating to Wilbur Field and James Matson Field.
Is there any discussion on item C?
I think we've already discussed the changes.
Yeah, I think we pretty well covered it. Entertain a motion to approve.
Mayor Longbine, I move we authorize the mayor to execute a First Amendment to the October 9th, 2023 agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises relating to Wilbur Field and James Madison Field.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to execute the attached updated agreement with Salina Baseball Enterprises relating to Wilbur Field and James Matson Field. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And that brings us to item 4.1D.
Item 4.1D is to authorize the city manager to execute a facility use agreement between the City of Salina and USD 305 regarding the use of Pestinger Family Stadium.
Thank you. And this was a late add to the packet, so if anyone would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure, I'll touch on that a little bit. The Dean Evans agreement, the USD 305 was a party to that agreement. In this particular agreement, they're not, and they are one of the funding contributors that Baseball Enterprises has solicited and secured. So they've asked, recognizing they're not a party to the Matson Field, Wilbur, or I should say Pestinger Family Field project. They asked for an agreement directly with the city just to ensure their priority of scheduling. And the contribution amount is negotiated between them and Salina Baseball Enterprises, but they've indicated a $200,000 contribution. And I would just reiterate that is a portion of all the funds that Salina Baseball Enterprises is raising as part of their fundraising effort for the project.
And that is shown in the facility use agreement also.
Correct.
Any further comments on item C? Or item D?
Mayor, if I may, at an appropriate time. I said, may I I had a quick clarification
go ahead.
at an appropriate time. As you look at this agreement and consider it, it has been provided to council for USD 305, but I've not heard back as to their review, and there's actually an update on the project on their agenda, I believe, tomorrow evening. So if you, in your action, could consider approving this in substantially as presented, subject to final approval by the city manager, I think that would help us advance finalization of the document, if that's appropriate.
So give us some latitude to respond to any edits or revisions that USD 305 might suggest, as long as it's substantially in the
Can you
same.
repeat that verbiage
form.
again?
Yeah, just that it would be authorize the city manager to execute the facility use agreement as substantially presented, subject to final review and approval by the city manager.
And USD 305 meets tomorrow on this?
Mr. Hancock can probably explain, but I understood it to be an update based on their previous commitment.
Yes, and I am scheduled to attend the USD 305 board meeting tomorrow and explain the phasing process that we're going through so that we can get started now, so that it's done in time for the 4A state tournament, which is the whole reason for why we're going through this process. And yes, there's a meeting tomorrow to talk about this, and I assume vote on it as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on the item D? Sounds like the project's coming together, so any public comment? I'll entertain a motion.
See if I got this correctly. Mayor Longbein, I move we authorize the city manager to execute a facility use agreement as substantially presented, and upon the final approval by the city manager, and to be executed by the city of Salina and USD 305 regarding the use of Pestinger Family Stadium.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to authorize the city manager to execute a substantially completed use agreement between the city of Salina and USD 305 regarding the use of Pestinger Family Stadium. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Go build us a ballpark, Kenny. Good. Good. That will bring us to the consent agenda, and as we've previously stated, we will be adding more items, routine items to the consent agenda, and it is lengthy. So I will turn it over to the clerk.
Just procedure, do we need to reiterate to the public that there is a right of citizens to,
That will come after she reads the
after,
consent. Yeah.
okay.
All right, so item 5.1 is to approve the minutes of the meeting of January 22nd, 2024. Item 5.2 is to approve resolution number 24-8189, updating the City of Salina Personnel Manual. Item 5.3, consider change orders number 2 and 3 totaling $81,478.92 with TNR Construction, Inc. for project number 20029, Centennial Ditch Waterline Adjustments and Sewer Line Protection, increasing the previous project authorization by $27,976.96 to $1,450,201.17, and authorizing the city manager to execute the change orders. Item 5.4, consider awarding the bid for project number 24005, 2024 chip seal to Circle C Construction of Goddard in the amount of $327,872.88 with a 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $344,266.52, and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Circle C Construction of Goddard upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents. And then item 5.5, consider awarding the bid for project number 24004, 2024 pavement sealing to Circle C Construction of Goddard, Kansas in the amount of $498,544.87 with a 10% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $548,399.36, and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Circle C Construction of Goddard, Kansas upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents. Item 5.6, approve resolution number 24-8190, appointing a member of the Planning Commission to serve on the Heritage Commission. Item 5.7, authorize a rebuild of landfill compactor unit number 1842 through Foley's Equipment Salina for an amount not to exceed $595,000. And item 5.8, approve resolution number 24-8182, authorizing the mayor to sign a first addendum to the memorandum of understanding among the city of Salina, Saline County, and Central Kansas Mental Health Center relating to the mental health co-responder program.
Thank you. That was a lot. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda?
Mayor, if I may, I have one clarification, and I don't think merits taking the item off of consent, but item 5.8, the agreement with Kansas Mental Health Center relating to our co-responders, the attached document included some subject headings of modification sought and update requested, which is kind of narrative for editorial purposes, but you have a revised version that is clean as an agreement to be executed. Nothing really changed other than kind of taking out those headings and references.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on the consent agenda items? Seeing none, is there any item that a commissioner would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, I move for approval.
Mr. Mayor, I move for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second. A motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Bring us to item administration, item 6.1.
Item 6.1, approve either ordinance number 24-11194 or number 24-11195, modifying existing City of Salina code sections regarding keeping of chickens within the city limits. Ordinance number 24-11194 incorporates directions from the City Commission, and ordinance number 24-11195 incorporates further recommendations by the Animal Control Advisory and Appeals Board.
Thank you. Mr. Hennessy.
Sean Hennessy, Assistant City Manager. What you have before you is two distinct ordinances for your consideration. Ordinance number 24-11194 incorporates a lot of the directions that we received from the City Commission at the November 13th, 2023 study session. It adopts a new section to the existing code. 24-11195 is the recommendations from the Animal Control Advisory Board, which came on February 5th, 2024. So what I'll do here, I won't read these to you verbatim, but I will go through and highlight all of the additional points. 24-11194 does require a lot of new additional requirements for the keeping of chickens, and so I'll go through those now. And again, all of these are new requirements which are not currently in the code. One is it requires a 10-foot setback from the parcel line for the keeping of chickens. This means that the chickens cannot go all the way up to a parcel line. There needs to be some sort of barrier, be it a fence or some other type of building. There is also, if it is incorporated both in the blue sheet as well as in the ordinance, if you look at the blue sheet, you'll see a chart. Currently, the City of Salina has a maximum number of 15 chickens per parcel. That number does not change under this proposed ordinance. However, it is tied to the size of the parcel in the future. So what happens is, if you look at this chart, which is in the ordinance as well as in the blue sheet, there is that what I would call the hard cap of 15, so you can't exceed that 15. However, understanding that some people have a number of chickens, and we discussed the lifespan of chickens, what we proposed was to gradually reduce the number of chickens that are allowed dependent upon the parcel size. So what this means is in 2025, there's no change. You're still allowed 15 chickens for all of 2025. However, starting in 2026 through 2027, you are allowed either 8, 10, 12, or 15 chickens depending upon the parcel size. And that can range from up to a half acre, up to 3/4 of an acre, up to an acre, or over an acre. For example, if you had, if you lived on a third of an acre in 2026, you would be allowed 8 chickens by code plus an additional 6. So that would take you up to 14 would be the maximum number. However, in 2028, it would only be 8 for your parcel side plus 4. So that would reduce you down to 12. And so it would be a gradual reduction on how many chickens would be allowed based upon the size of the parcel. It is important to note that that 15 is a hard cap. So if you have a large, greater than 1 acre parcel, that doesn't mean that you would get to have 21 chickens in 2026 or 2027. The reason we did this is because it's literally almost impossible to keep track of individual chickens, as far as keeping track of how many are located, which ones have deceased, which ones are still present and everything. So this is a gradual reduction in the number of chickens that would be allowed based upon the parcel size. And that is a significant change because currently you can have up to the 15 maximum with no regards to the overall parcel size. This ordinance also requires the person keeping the chickens to acquire a chicken permit. This would be a $35 permit that would go into effect. They would apply. This would be one of the areas where we would get the information about the parcel size. It is important to note that we're not requiring an inspection ahead of time just because of the staffing costs and the delay. Our code continues to be a complaint-driven code, so if there was a complaint that somebody had an excessive number of chickens, then we would investigate, but we wouldn't pre-investigate before issuing a chicken permit. All of this ordinance, all of these requirements, and there's still several other I want to go over too. I should have placed this at the beginning, but I guess I have egg on my face, is that all of these requirements will go into effect on January 1st of 2025. We understand that it's going to take a while for people to be in compliance with these, and so we wanted to delay any kind of implementation of this. So this 10-foot setback, the requirements for the chicken permit, et cetera, would not go into effect until January 1 of 2025. There is, if somebody were to be denied their request for a chicken permit, there would be an appeal process to the city manager. If they still felt that they were an aggrieved party, they would have another appeal to you directly as the city commission. You would be the final decider on whether or not a chicken permit was to be granted or not. As our current code is, this ordinance does not include any restrictions on roosters. The city of Salina does not have any restrictions on roosters, nor does this proposed ordinance. This ordinance does restrict the keeping of chickens only to single-family residences, not multifamily or otherwise. The coop under this proposed ordinance is required to be in the backyard, not in the side yard or the front yard. And that, again, is another reason why we wanted to delay the implementation of this. An additional change is the current code, the proposed ordinance maintains the 50-foot distance requirement that is in the current code. However, it clarifies it by saying you can't have the chicken coop within 50 feet from a dwelling occupied by any person. The current code basically says a building used by any person in any way, and this is very broad, particularly if you have a detached building or something else which is rarely accessed. So that would modify that 50-foot requirement to say that it was within 50 foot of any building that was occupied. Additionally, a new requirement in this proposed ordinance is the chicken coop would have to provide 2 square feet per chicken. Again, there is still that hard cap of 15 chickens, so you would, again, it's going to be dependent upon the number of chickens, but there is also a limit of only 200 square feet for maximum size for a chicken coop. That would be with 15 chickens, that would be a very large chicken coop if you had over 200 square feet for the chicken coop. Additionally, so this is an entirely new article established within the code, which is called, not shockingly, the keeping of chickens. So this is a new article where these new requirements are in place. There are several modifications to existing code in other areas. In section 7.31, the references to chickens were removed, and that's because the proposed ordinance has its own chicken section which has those requirements. Additionally, 7-33 is modified because currently the way the code is written, it states that you can't have any structure which is used for the keeping of any animals, any building occupied or in any way used to 50 feet. So again, this modifies that existing 50-foot requirement to whereby it's only within 50 feet of any occupied dwelling. 7.58 has been modified. It removes references to county health officer. This code was drafted prior to the separation of the county health department. The county took over that, whereas the city took over the animal shelter. So it removes those references. And that is 24-11194. 24-11195 is the recommendations from the Animal Control Advisory Board. And they do not recommend any new requirements to the code. What they voted to support was the changes that I just alluded to in 731, 33, and 58, namely the 50-foot separation from the coop and other occupied dwellings, and then the modification that were also present in 24-11194. However, they did not support any of the additional requirements such as a setback, the requirement for a chicken permit, and the other requirements that I just went through. So those are the two ordinances which are before you. You have the option of adopting these in whole. You can, that would be either 24-11194 or 24-11195. You can approve either of the ordinance with amendments as you deem appropriate. You can postpone consideration of either of these ordinances to a specified date and time or reasons for a number of different reasons. You can make provisions for additional public input prior to taking action. You can provide staff direction by adding additional information you would like to request for further consideration, or you could provide direction to the staff regarding ordinance revisions to be drafted and returned to the City Commission for future consideration. Or you may vote to deny both ordinances, one or both ordinances, 24-11194 or 24-11195. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
If I could, number one, I want to acknowledge Sean's work on this. This is it. I think it's obvious how complicated it is, and then how much feedback we get. But and there's a lot going on here. If you could, you might elaborate on the annoyance of the neighbor versus the sensibilities of a reasonable person.
Sure.
Change.
Yes. So I'll read for you the section, what we currently have, as well as what is proposed for modifications. So for example, section 7-33, A, and I will read this to you, it shall be unlawful, this is the current code, it shall be unlawful for any person to maintain any chicken coop, pigeon cote, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, or rabbit hutch closer than 50 feet to the nearest portion of any building occupied by or in any way used by any person other than the dwelling occupied by the owner of the animals. The reason we took a look at this was because if you had an outbuilding, it could be not only a detached garage or a shed or something of that nature, that would fall within that parameter. So the new proposal in the new code, both in 11195 and 11194, is to change that within 50 feet of any occupied dwelling. So
I was actually referring to 758.
758. Yes.
Offensive to
Yes.
annoying the neighbor versus offensive to a reasonable person.
And that is, if you look at 758A, as it's currently drafted, it says it shall be unlawful for any person to keep or maintain any animal in any structure or area that is not clean, dry, and sanitary, free from debris and offensive odors that annoy any neighbor and devoid of rodents and vermin. And so what the proposed ordinances both proposed is to change that verbiage to read that, and I'll read you the proposed language. It shall be unlawful for any person to keep or maintain any animal in any yard, structure, area that is not clean, dry, and sanitary, free from debris and odors which are offensive to a reasonable person of ordinary sensibilities and which adversely or unreasonably interfere with the use and enjoyment of property by emanating or crossing any property line and free from rodents and vermin. So what this does is it establishes a standard rather than just saying, our current code says that if it annoys any neighbor, any structure, animal yard structure, is not allowed. What this proposed change in both ordinances establishes a standard, which is that of an ordinary person. It's for a reasonable person of ordinary sensibilities. Sometimes the words start flowing together. And that's the standard. It's for a reasonable person of ordinary sensibilities.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of a accepted.
And that is a standard
legal
which is very commonly adopted as far as when it comes to any kind of a nuisance or adoption otherwise.
And that's determined by whom?
Well, anything of this has to be determined by somebody. You've got to look at the collective whole. You've got to look at taking a determination. Can you detect other odors that are there when you investigate that? There is no precise definition of what that is, but this basically establishes a standard which is pretty typical for the adoption, not only in nuisances but in other areas, is to have this standard, as difficult as it is to be completely neutral, because it's not based on any kind of scientific certainty.
But I think the ultimate answer is a judge.
Yes.
At the end of the day, I mean, it starts with an assessment at the staff level, but it's ultimately a code violation that could be determined by a judge.
Questions for Mr. Hennessy?
No question, but a lot of good hard work.
Yes, this was a lot of work, and it got really, really complex and complicated. And
I haven't seen any other communities. What I struggled with was trying to figure out a way to address the parcel size, because I couldn't find any other communities in Kansas. There may have been, but I did not find any that have modified that. So I want to be respectful of people that have chickens currently, but by the same token, if we're going to limiting the number of chickens based upon the size of the parcel, I just realized that it's impossible to keep track of individual chickens. We literally would have animal controls trying, is that the same chicken or not? So that's why we decided to go with the tying the parcel size and then a graduated reduction, so that people that have a larger number of chickens would at least have some certainty on where they fall. And you can certainly modify either the size of the parcel or the number of chickens that are allowed. That is, again, up to your discretion as you see fit.
Okay, what's the current fee for a dog license? Anyone here know? I know I don't.
I believe it's 20 or 25, but I just registered a dog recently, but I believe it's 25, but I don't remember specifically.
what was the question?
What the current price to register a dog is? A dog license?
I just did that last year. I should know.
So you're in the same position I am. I spent the money and I don't remember.
Well, obviously it wasn't too much, 'cause neither one of you.
I did the lifetime registration, so I just wrote the check.
So does this completely fall under the purview of animal control, or is there some overlap with neighborhood services, or?
This would be under animal control. They would make the determination based upon, again, complaints, the number of chickens, and they would be able to make a determination as far as, obviously, they would use other city resources if they needed to determine the parcel size, et cetera. But it would fall under animal control, subject to appeals to both the city manager as well as you as a final arbiter.
A pet license is $10 if it's spayed or neutered, and $18 if it's not spayed or neutered.
Okay, thank you. So we're regulating these more in line with pets or more in line with a business of having chickens?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are these rules set up more in line with people having chickens as a business or as pets?
This ordinance does not allow for commercial operations for chickens. This permit is much like you do currently for bees, beekeeping permit, as well as that. It's not intended for large-scale commercial. It is intended for private use. We all know that some people may sell their chickens, but it's not intended for large-scale commercial use.
And I don't want to minimize the amount of administration involved with this, but I would say it's more at the pet level. But from a permitting, inspection, administration standpoint, it's a sizable undertaking.
Okay.
And that is my concern, is that we simply do not have resources to go out and measure lots and count chickens. And my thoughts on this is I would like to find a solution that is the least restrictive for the majority of our chicken owners. And
although the complaints don't come from the owners, they come from the people who feel offended by them. I mean, you have to, I know, find a middle ground somewhere, but, we have similar rules for other types of pets and animals, or situations where you could call an animal control officer in if, dogs being the most common pet probably, if the yard's messy and there's vermin and there's foul odor, would be reason to call an animal control officer in.
I talked to some of my realtor friends and was surprised there's considerably more chickens in Salina than I would have ever guessed. And as far as I know, this is the first complaint that we've really received dealing with chickens. I think Ordinance 24-11194 puts a substantial amount of work upon city staff and would be fairly complex to to monitor. I run into an issue when we start talking about coops versus chickens running free in the yard. It seems like that's where some of our issues are. And so I did some additional homework on my own. And one of the things that I found is, to me as a city commissioner, our job is to protect the health and safety of the citizens. And one of the things I did find is that chickens, through the course of what they do, can create a substantial amount of ammonia, which can be harmful to individuals. So I did go out and again, this would take city staff time, but it would only take time upon a complaint. But there are meters out there that will monitor the amount of ammonia in the air. I would think in an outdoor setting it wouldn't be substantial, but I think one of the complaints we'd received from the Millers is that they had the odor inside the house. So I don't know what is safe and what's not safe. This is a whole new thing that I just came across this weekend from reviewing some of this. So I don't know from a health standpoint if that's something we want to look into. Just throwing that out there.
I think having the barrier, that 10-foot buffer, chicken, they molt. I mean, some of their debris can actually travel, depending on what type of fence you have. I mean, it's basically no barrier. The other advantage of permitting is that we know where the chickens are. I mean, if there are illnesses or diseases or other public health hazards, we know who to notify.
In my experience with exposure to various chemicals is time-weighted exposure. There is one thing to be exposed to something for 10 minutes and quite another to be exposed for 10 hours. And as far as the health concerns, I think that's what we're looking at here, is something that never goes away. And I would be in favor of amending Ordinance 11-24-119-195 to include the 10-foot barrier. Would be section 7.158 and also section 7.160. The permitting and the square footage, I think, is just something that we would really have trouble getting a handle on, and I don't think that would solve a problem that we're dealing with today.
The 10-foot barrier, what was the other one, Mayor Longbine, that you said?
7.158, the location requirements, and 7.160, the nuisance issue, and under general requirements.
Just as a point of clarity, when you refer to the square footage requirements, are you talking about the actual chicken coop or the lot requirements? Which are you referring to?
In the location requirements?
Well, okay, yeah, I guess that would answer that. So you're talking about the lot size then?
No.
So just to clarify, you're suggesting all A through G that are included in 7158?
Yes.
So that'd be single-family residence, only kept on property which is the principal residence of the owner, rear yard, only in the rear yard, 50 feet from other occupied dwellings, 10 feet from the property line, no chicken shall run at large, and no person shall picket or tie a chicken in the street or public right-of-way for grazing or feeding.
Yeah, and no solution is going to be perfect, but we would just like it to be better.
Which section was that again?
7158. I found it on page 4 of
Yeah. Okay.
Ordinance
It's right below where you're at.
Yeah, I see it now. Okay.
So, section 7160 D and F, would you have to reword that to remove or permittee?
Yes.
Yes, that's scratch D.
I don't know that you would need to necessarily scratch it, but reword
Modify
it.
it, amend it, yeah.
Yeah, to citizen or something.
I guess I'm confused by F. It says no person shall allow a chicken to run at large. Does that mean unfenced? Is that what that means? I mean,
Yeah, that could mean when they get off their property that's
okay,
a code
I guess what I'm
violation.
saying is it can run within a yard as long as it's not within 10 feet of the owner's property line.
At
Yes.
large typically means not within any
With
kind
any
of
boundary.
restriction.
Okay,
So there's
that's
no
what-
fence.
okay.
So if you just have them in their front yard, I mean,
Right,
some people do
okay.
that with their chickens, so.
You find that when you go to smaller communities. You go out in the
So I understand the proposal is to incorporate 7158 and 7160, but to modify D and F to state what exactly, or in place of the permittee? Is it a chicken owner? Is it a?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You could replace permittee with an owner shall.
I believe you could substitute a chicken owner, since there would be no chicken permit issued if this were to be adopted. Is that what you're looking at, chicken owner?
Sounds proper that, the permit, I think, would just be another thing for the chicken owners to deal with and city staff to follow with,
And so just to be clear, the language as it relates to annoyance of the neighbor is in 158?
Yes, and that's
In-
modified in both, so.
Is it 158?
Well, for animal
Oh,
structures.
you're right, it is modified in
yes.
both, okay.
Now, it is important to note, I want to make sure that there is also the requirement in this that if you vote to approve these, this would restrict chicken coops to only the rear yard, and they could not be on the side and front yard. So,
I was just going to ask, rear yard is a very rigidly defined space. I mean, it's behind I'm assuming the back corner of the house. I mean, rear yard is a legally defined term.
it's, I don't know, actually, I'll defer the city attorney if we've actually technically defined that. I mean, on some lots it may be confusing, but I believe that in the vast majority of cases, you can determine what is the front and rear yard and side yard, but in some oddball-shaped yards, it may be difficult. So I don't know if we have adopted formally a definition of a side and rear
We
yard.
have by way of the zoning code, but I don't know how it carries over to.
Yeah, that's what I was checking to see if rear yard,
so
as I
on a
recall,
typical
it's defined, but-
rectangular sized lot, the side yard would include any space between the houses?
Yes, it would be the essentially, again, I'm not saying that this is the actual definition that we formally adopted, but typically the side yard is that space between the houses, and the rear yard just consists that which is located behind the dwelling itself. That space in between the two would be considered a side yard.
Yeah, I think on a corner lots, I'd have to look at the zoning, but I think it's defined a little differently.
But does side yard keep extending, that space between the houses, does that imaginary line keep extending beyond the back corner of the house to the rear lot?
Typically, that's what I've seen in the past is that the rear yard, it essentially extends out as if the house was extending all the way out. You have potentially, again, there's oddball sized parcels all over the place, but then you would have the side yard would be that area, which can be very minimal, consisting solely of a setback, or it can be an extremely large area on other lots.
Right.
And then the front yard is what extends from the house in the
If
front.
one house is set 30 feet forward of the other house, does the side yard end at the back of the house that's further up, or the back of the house that's further back?
The zoning code defines the rear yard as, see yard rear, but rear yard is a yard extending along the full length of the rear lot line and back to a line drawn parallel to the rear lot line at a distance therefrom equal to the depth of the required rear yard. In the case of a corner lot, there shall be no rear yard as defined, and in such case, the sides opposite the street side shall be considered as side yards for setback purposes.
So on a corner lot, you don't have a rear. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So
That one I can get. You may have to read that first one again, though.
It's the yard extending along the full length of the rear lot line
Got
and
that?
back to a line drawn parallel to the rear lot line at a distance therefrom equal to the depth of the required rear yard. So bear in mind, this is a zoning code that specifies minimum rear yard, side yards, front yards.
So
read the corner lot line.
Yeah,
again.
so then it goes on to say, in the case of a corner lot, there shall be no rear yard as defined, and in such case, the sides opposite the street sides shall be considered as side yards for setback purposes.
So if there's 50 feet behind the rearmost wall of the house back to the lot line,
No, it's 50 feet from wherever the coop is to any occupied dwelling.
Other than the owner's
Other than the
residence,
owner.
so
Yeah,
the
other than
neighbor's
the
house.
Yes.
I had to
So
read-
it's not dependent upon one lot, it's really dependent upon where two
lots.
dwellings fall.
Yeah.
As far as whether or not they meet the distance requirement. You could have 10 feet on one and 41 on another, and that would be in the requirement, but it's 50 feet between occupied dwellings.
Coop in an occupied dwelling other than the owner's residence.
I'm
So
gonna
would
ask
you like to keep the side and backyard, or side and front yard restriction, or, because currently there is no restriction on where the coops can be located. So this would be a new requirement, not allowing them on the front and side yard.
I would keep the rear yard restriction, and if it's a corner lot, just have them appeal for an exception.
Well, the coop's going to require a fence, which I'm just thinking out loud here at this point. The question I have is, what are our rules regarding a fence past the setback? Because to me that would almost kind of correct itself, where if you're not able to put that enclosure past the setback, then that would, to me, that would make sense. It would kind of be your delineation of maybe acceptable
Yeah,
lot usage.
When you say setback, you're referring to the side yard setback on a corner lot?
Yes.
Um,
Or are there exceptions to that?
I follow your logic, and I think that's what we are currently seeing, at least the chickens in a corner lot that I'm familiar with. In all honesty, if your interest is to focus on rear yards but try to identify a solution for a corner lot, that might be the solution, but I think we would need an opportunity to draft some language to that effect.
Okay.
To make it more clear.
No, it makes more sense because now that I'm thinking about this, I think there's rules that apply to 6-foot fence versus 4-foot fence,
Right,
et cetera.
yeah.
So then it gets a little more
That's
vague.
True. I think zoning staff might be able to have gone through similar scenarios, not related to chickens, but there might be a lesson to be learned there that we might be able to craft some language.
I would just hate to see somebody with a side yard being excluded just based on.
Yeah, the thing you run into is that that corner lot has neighbor side yards on each one of their yards. And so when you get into the 50-foot setback, that gets to be challenging.
True.
In fact, in one instance, we have an affidavit of co-ownership of the chickens so that the one set of neighbors can be co-owners and have their residence within 50 feet.
Any further questions from staff? Is there any public comment? Go ahead. Please state your name and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Brian Metzger. On the issue of the backyard, if people kept their chickens in the front yard, you'd realize how many people in Salina have chickens. I'm not familiar with every house in Salina, but I've never seen a chicken coop in a front yard in Salina. I think that's pretty much a non-issue. If it's an issue of being in the side yard and the neighbor's house is 50 feet away, then it shouldn't be an issue. On the issue of ammonia from chicken manure, if chicken manure gets deep, stays wet and warm, it will produce a lot of ammonia. If it's kept cleaned up, that's not an issue. I personally visited with everybody involved in this original complaint, people on both sides of the fence, and I think there may have been some legitimate grievances initially, but the people keeping the chickens, I even asked if I could see their yard, their chicken coop, their whole setup. They were happy to show me everything. I did not see any mess. I did not smell anything. The coop is at least as nice as mine, maybe a little nicer. If there were any of those issues that may have existed to begin with, I believe were resolved. But this nonsense has gone on and on and on, and it has become extremely complicated. When it was first brought up at the city commission meeting, half the commissioners present admitted that they know nothing about chickens. Well, I want to commend the Animal Control Advisory Board for their work on this and their input. It was a big meeting. A lot of people turned out. And these are people that do know about these issues. And they flatly, emphatically rejected everything except for the two recommendations that they put in 24-11125. I would encourage you to follow their recommendation. Their input is valid and should be heavily considered. And 24-11194 is overly complex. It is over-regulation of a non-issue. It's kind of taken on a life of its own, and it's just not necessary. I would implore you to approve 24-11195. Thank you.
Mr. Metzger, can I ask you one question?
Yes.
Do you have chickens?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought that's why I picked that up. Do you put some kind of chemical on your yard or anything to keep the ammonia down? In doing my little bit of research, it sounds like there are chemicals that can be used to mitigate that.
There are things that can be done, not so much chemicals, but liming.
Right.
You can get bags of barnyard lime that can help. Keeping it relatively clean and dry is the biggest thing. And there are a lot of products that can help keep the coop and the run fairly clean and dry.
If chickens are allowed to run through the yard and we get moisture, will that create the additional?
That will not be enough concentrated manure to create ammonia. I am not a chemist, but in my experience, that would not be an issue.
You have more experience than I do.
It is important to note that 7-5, it currently does require the spading and liming once every 3 months from April through December. So that section is already in the code and under both ordinances would remain.
And from a practical standpoint, I think every 3 months is excessive, but it's already in the code.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metzger, and thank you for your assistance and involvement in this issue.
My pleasure.
Rosemary Meyer, Salina, Kansas, and I would hope you guys consider taking Mr. Hennessy's report seriously and adopting it. I think he's done a real good job of researching this, and I will have to disagree with the gentleman before me about the animal shelter board meeting that was held a week ago. I was there. I thought it was very unorganized. They don't have a chairman. They didn't have anybody taking notes. One person did all the speaking for all of the board members. And in my opinion, it was, I don't want to say what I called it, but it was a chaos. I've been on many boards, I've attended board meetings, and I have never seen a board run like that board was. I really believe that that board needs to be disbanded and a new board started up and send these people through training. Thank you.
I'm Lene Meyer from Salina, and this is all brand new to me. I'm in a learning process here. I do have some comments, questions. I'm trying to speak from what I'm learning, also from my heart. What she just said, I think is important. I went to that meeting as well, and it seemed pretty dominating in terms of one person did most of the talking. There are 11 people on that board, but very few I heard talk. It seemed like to me they had already predetermined that they were going to just do what they did and didn't, I don't think, didn't elicit enough input. And one of the persons that did talk a lot seemed to have, my gut was telling me that he seemed to be having contact with someone that perhaps agreed. I was just really concerned about the way that was handled. It was very immature. What I'm learning here today, and it was mentioned under D, I was wondering if it says once every 3 months from the month of April through month of December, all structures are pinned, all earthen yards or runways wherein chickens are kept shall be spaded and limed once every 3 months from the month of April through December. I'm questioning, is that documented, that everyone that has chickens, is that a document that that's done? If not, it should be. Someone mentioned the size of the coop per, was that 2 square feet per chicken you have to have? So if you have 15 chickens, you have to have a coop that's 30, is that correct? 30 square feet? And if a coop is not that size, is what happens then? Are they told you must get different? Let's see. I'm watching, oh my gosh, time goes quick. I am just generally concerned. I have several other things, but my time's going to be running out. And I do hope you hold this vote until you take a good hard look at lots of other things. And I would like to say if someone had a neighbor who had some concerns, the person with the chickens, I would hope, would be willing and open to really listen with compassion and caring for another human being to make corrections, whatever's necessary. I could go on, but I have to shut up.
Thank you.
Anton Frobenius. I was wondering about, you have to have your chickens on the lot you currently reside on. So if I have another lot that is adjacent or close across the street, say, I can't have chickens on that lot across the street or adjacent or whatever. It has to be on the lot that I reside on.
The proposed ordinance does require that they're located at the primary residence. So it does not allow for the keeping of chickens other than at the primary residence. There, in the code currently, there is no requirement for that. But the proposed ordinance does require they be kept at the location of the primary residence.
And there are instances where one person owns two lots and they're treated as one residential location. Across the street, down the street, standalone lot, I don't think would meet that requirement if it were adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mark Labus. Now, I'm not sure how many complaints you've gotten about chickens. That's never been mentioned as far as I know. I just know of what the board said here of one complaint. I can't believe we're spending so much time on this when realistically you change one thing in the code of saying you can't have chickens within 50 feet of any occupied structure. And that solves the problem on everything. The smell, you know what, to be honest, even though it may be offensive smell, whatever, I've seen it time and time again. I've been through it already. The judge, no one has any defense for that. It's, oh, well, it smelled offensive. Well, to be honest, everybody's offense smells are different. I dislike smelled broccoli cooking, but that's me. So at what point is it ordinary person and whatnot? Because if it goes before a municipal court, there's one judge. There's no jury. And most of the time, they're going to rule with the city. Seen it time and time again. So and while the interpretation is bad, the intent was good. Just something to think about.
Norman Mantle, Salina. So we're gonna have to start surveying this property? You're squeezing it down to this. Where is the property line? Because this property line issue is getting bigger and bigger. We're in court in the U.S. Supreme Court over property lines, access rights, airspace. Wow. You guys gotta deal with it.
Hi, I'm Dawn Miller. I'm the one complaining about chicken. I'm the one be sick and suffer. Almost every night, I don't know, not so much about chicken, gas and pneumonia like now, but some kind of chemical make me very sick. And last night, I sit down and watch ball game, go cheap. And anyway, my eye, my sinus burned so bad, and I have to use my inhaler. Doctor provide for me inhaler, special eye drop, cream, skin above my cheek, burn. This morning I call health department can't come. That's how bad last night. I have so much headache. My chest was start tight. Not just chicken poop or pee involved. It's some kind of chemical. I don't know what that is they put on. Between in the day, not too bad. At night, between 6 o'clock at night and weekend, they figure out I can't call nobody. That's why they must put something. I'm the one live next door. The chicken say allow to chicken run around in the fence, but they didn't. They kept the chicken on one place, pinned up. No have any access to go chicken coop. I know what I talk about. I'm 70 years old. I hope city commission have passion and listen some of this, what I talk about. I never been sick like this ever. Almost 2 years now, go almost 2 years. You have to live next door from them to find out how smell, how hurt, how your body reacts. I try to keep my mouth shut, not to complain, but this go too far. This is my health. Life is too short. That kid, I don't want to hurt them feeling. We add them before they have chicken. Please put chicken on other side. They won't do it. And we add again. They won't do it. And we give more yard over for them. They're 27-year-old, 28-year-old, not like family man to take care. Stop, they be gone a lot. And he would say, no more over my yard. We try to make, just kind of keep clean and do extra for them. What the good neighbor for. I share food, I share everything.
Ms. Miller, your time's expired. You got 10 seconds, please.
Okay, so please have passion and listen what I complain. If not too much, I won't complain. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Bring it back to follow up with commissioner comments, or?
Well, I think there are enough little issues that we should probably clean up, and I'd move to postpone consideration of this for either 2 weeks or 4 weeks so that staff can bring back a cleaner idea of the definition of the rear and side yards, corner lot provisions, 10-foot buffer, the provisions in 7-158, and it's one other thing that we discussed. And, what was it?
Provision 160.
The definition of where the, was it 160? Yeah, 7-160, and just bring back something that incorporates all this. We don't necessarily try to over-regulate. Most rules we have are to protect those who disagree with what someone else wants to do. It's just to protect the minority, or so that we have fair and impartial consideration of someone who disagrees with the common opinion. So I can see it's not over-regulating it, but I'd like us to do it as well as we can the first time, and so we don't have to keep redoing this.
Is the 10-foot buffer between the property line and where the chickens can be? Is that?
That's my
That's
understanding.
how I understand it.
Yes, the 10-foot setback is basically the chickens cannot come within 10 feet of the parcel line.
And how do we monitor that?
Excuse me?
How do we monitor that?
I think there'd be an expectation there's a physical barrier of some sort.
Yes. That's the only way it would be able to do, would be there would have to be the erection of, be it a fence within a fence or a building or some other structure, because otherwise it's impossible to monitor.
Well, it's kind of like most of our rules. You're not supposed to build a permanent structure in the utility easement back of the house. Well, it's never. We don't go out looking for them, but when someone has to come through and repair something, that's when the complaint is originated. Yeah,
And,
and I'm assuming all this is complaint-driven monitoring anyway.
And I think in the future, that's the way it would continue to be. Each issue and complaint-driven, and the way you would, the solution, Commissioner Hoppick, would be chicken wire.
I understand yeah, I'm just.
For point of, there is a motion on the.
If I can just clarify.
Sure.
If I think I kind of amalgamating what was said and what I heard you say, starting with ordinance 24-11195, and then incorporating section 7158 and 7160 from 11194, and resolving, clarifying the language as relates to permittee, since there are no permits, and providing clarification about rear yards and side yards. Redraft that. Obviously, you as a governing body can amend it then the next go around as well, but staff redraft something along those lines for your consideration.
Perfect. That's an excellent example of why students should do well in English class and debate. Yes. That would be it. Yeah.
Is that not something we can just do here by amending the motion?
The rear yard, side yard part is going to take some effort on our part to come up with some wording for your consideration, I think. Other than that, I think you probably could do it by way of amendment.
I mean, I commend staff for all the work they've done on this, but I feel like we've put a lot of time into this, and I kind of just lean towards getting something passed.
Well, if we get this close to a good product, I'd hate to not go that last inch. Just, 2 weeks here, for something that'll last 20 years is a small investment in time.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. Do you want to rephrase that from the city commissioner's
No, the city manager summed it up better than I could myself.
Was that in 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
Whichever the staff.
It's easy for me to say. I'm not the one that has to draft it.
I would leave.
Let's go with 4 weeks, please. So that because I the biggest concern I have is just getting the proper definition for side lots and incorporating that into the ordinance. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. We can clean that up, but I want to be very clear on that. So obviously I'm going to have to reach out and do some research on that. So
to make sure we know what we're going to be looking at in 2 to 4 weeks is it's ordinance 24-11195.
Yes.
With the addition of the 10-foot setback.
Yes, it would, and that would be section 7-158 and 7-160. However, 160 would be modified to make it clear not refer to permittees.
Right.
And then it would also incorporate the 10-foot setback.
So, but just to be clear, 7158 includes A through G.
Yes.
The 10-foot setback is E out of that list, but
Yes.
there are other provisions in 7158.
And that is where the side yard and rear yard definition will be critical.
Right.
The side yard variation wouldn't that be with the 50-foot barrier and the 10-foot barrier? To me, it would kind of take care of that in itself as far as the definition or the rules of it.
The 50-foot does apply irrespective of where the coop is located. It's just basically a 50-foot separation between occupied dwellings other than the chicken owners. And then also there is the 10-foot is basically a barrier within a barrier is one way I would describe it. 10 feet from the parcel line, the chickens would be restricted from accessing. We don't certainly define what that is, but you wouldn't be allowed to have chickens within 10 feet of the parcel line.
And based on most side yards, you're not going to be able to have chickens on your side yard.
Unless you have an exceptionally large side yard.
Yeah, in the vast majority, but again, as the city manager read, for a corner lot, the side yards are different and whatnot, so there's always the oddball parcels.
And I think what we're trying to do here is to create a distance between a residence and the chickens. We've addressed the chicken coops before, but not the actual chickens. So I guess this is an opportunity to try to alleviate the issue that Ms. Miller has brought to us. And I guess if that doesn't work, then we may have to address something else if that is our issue there. So.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone.
What, for clarification, was there a second? Number one, is there clarity about the motion? And then there was a second.
I'll second Commissioner Davis's motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to postpone and amend ordinance number 24-11195, and that would come to March 11th. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye. Nay.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. We will revisit this on March 11th. Thank you for all your efforts and all the input we've had. That will bring us to item 6.2.
6.2, authorize the purchase of fire apparatus from Pierce Manufacturing through Conrad Fire Equipment in the amount of $8,939,831.13 with a 5% contingency.
Snyder.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, good afternoon, or good evening. Instead of going line by line on the blue sheet and all the information you've been giving, what I'm going to do is go over the high-level talking points of where we've been and where we are now. The points will summarize the key aspects of the proposal, emphasizing the strategic, operational, financial rationale behind the structured approach and the recommended purchase and updating of the city's fire apparatus fleet. Listed in the proposal are a total of 7 apparatus, 2 Pierce Enforcer pumpers, 2 Pierce Enforcer heavy-duty rescues, 2 Pierce Enforcer 107-foot quints, and 1 Pierce Enforcer 100-foot pump elevated platform. For over 20 years of ad hoc purchasing, it's led to maintenance, age, and parts availability challenges within the fire apparatus fleet here in Salina. Pursuant to your guidance and the City Commissioner's Office, in collaboration with the Finance Department, we started a structured initiative to see how we could make our way forward. We brought that initiative in November to you for a study session and what we had ascertained, how it related to NFPA, ISO, and other external criteria that are utilized around the country. We started with an objective fleet assessment, identified aging units, and prioritized the need for replacement to enhance operational effectiveness, safety, and resilience. The replacement plan integrates with the capital improvement plan, proposing a 20-year cycle for apparatus use before sale, thus optimizing operational readiness and fiscal responsibility. Through a detailed evaluation of available procurement processes, including comparison of prices, timelines, production, consolidation, service capabilities, and specifications, we realized that an opportunity was there for us by utilizing a cooperative purchase group. We selected Sourcewell to utilize for that. 3 vendors were chosen that we had and met with, and we gave them our basic criteria for all the apparatus, and subsequently, based on all of what we figured in, we went with Pierce over Spartan or Rosenbauer, or we recommended Pierce. So the financial considerations, which I said we presented in November, the proposal included this proposal now, where we stand, is a prepayment discount of $305,502.25, with funding through bond financing determined as the best financial option. A fiscal note outlines the authorization for issuing general obligation bonds not to exceed 9.5 is where we had started for this purchase, with annual debt service payments supported by sales tax in the Sales Tax Capital Fund. The initiative marks a significant step in enhancing the efficiency, safety, and effectiveness of our emergency response services, setting a strong foundation for future readiness, resiliency, and aligning with the city's commitment to community safety and fiscal prudence. City staff has identified the following options for your consideration. Option 1, authorize the city manager to enter into a purchasing agreement with Conrad Fire Equipment for the specified fire apparatus at an amount of $8,939,831.13 with a 5% contingency. That would include the 2 new Pierce Enforcer pumpers, 2 new Pierce Enforcer heavy-duty rescues, 2 new Pierce Enforcer 107-foot quints, and 1 new Pierce Enforcer 100-foot elevated pump platform. Option 2 would be approve the purchase of the fire apparatus with any amendments deemed necessary by the governing body, by yourselves. Option 3 would be to postpone the purchase consideration to gather further information as requested by the City Commission. And option 4, vote to deny the proposal as it is currently presented. Staff recommends option 1, and I am certainly willing to answer any questions. And I know Debbie Pack is here from Finance, and I have some people from the working group as well. So if there's anything specific, we can certainly answer questions.
Questions?
Just one, way down the road, would all of these apparati age out at the same time? Because we're not staggering these purchases.
Right, and the disadvantage is, and we looked at that, and the disadvantage is where we're at. So what we've done is we've staggered out a lot. We presented a 25-year plan. Derek, am I correct there? 20 years? I had it out to 25, but a 20-year plan. So this isn't all of our apparatus, but we have to get to a point to where it will become better and better. But the way we did this and the way we figured it out, the impact to the city is as least impactful as we could do.
So we're bond financing for 10 years. So I want that to correspond to the frontline life of the equipment, and then be able to cycle that into reserve status, and then as those bonds are paid off, be in a position to finance the next round of frontline equipment. Okay. But I need to look to Derek in particular to confirm the viability of this equipment to be in reserve status.
Commissioners, Derek Herzog, Battalion Chief, Salina Fire. Yeah, so they're both.
State your name, Chief.
Yeah, Derek Herzog, Battalion Chief. So they're both kind of right. So it is a 20-year plan, right? To almost said Mayor Davis. I've been listening to so many meetings for so long, but to Commissioner Davis's point, right? The 20 years would be the lifespan of these trucks. So to the city manager's point, at 10 years, we'd be looking at doing this again. Okay. And then so these trucks in at 10 years would be in reserve status. At the end of their 20-year cycle, they get sold out. So that we're in a constant process of doing that. And that's right what the commission came up with last year, within the last couple of years, of trying to get a plan across the city, a plan of replacement, and getting that to where it's kind of streamlined instead of here, and here. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Because maybe I guess if this simplifies it, instead of buying, how many vehicles are we replacing? Seven. Instead of over the next 10 years, we're buying one here, and so we're, this way, by buying all these, we're streamlining, or I say streamlining, we're having a steady cash flow, and so we kind of know next year we're going to spend 1.5 million on this or whatever. It just kind of.
There is, within the plan, Commissioner, there is other apparatus that will be considered that in the plan we proposed. But however, I don't believe that's for another 2 years, and I believe that's just one that adds in. So with the way that we've decided to pay for these, that keeps the impact as minimal as possible. So it keeps it, you're never going to be perfectly level with your annual
just
cost.
Easier to budget.
Right, absolutely.
What happens to the current equipment we have?
We'll make you a good deal on it.
So I'll just.
You only have so many parking spots out there.
Right. So we do. So the way that these will come in, where they are, with Pierce, where they are at in their current process of being finished. We're looking at a couple trucks like 7 months. I think the last one will be 12 months from now. So we're going to have a little bit of this, as they come in. So our first out trucks that we currently have would be moved to reserve status. The reserve trucks that we currently have would be sold.
For whatever, okay.
For whatever.
That's, so the better ones move into reserve, the ones we have in reserve now
Correct,
get
right,
sold.
because some of
okay.
our current reserve apparatus are over 35 years old.
Yeah.
So we've been having conversations about how viable are they for resale? Where might they have the most value, whether it's Purple Wave or some vendor that might dispose of them, sell them outright. But we need to be mindful of, being clear about their condition if we sell them to anyone that intends to use them. If I could, if you'd be willing to humor me, we've had this conversation as part of the study session. Chief and his staff have done a great job of working through this. One of the most noteworthy things to me about all this is not the typical spec bid, low bidder award. It's not only is it deviating from the low bidder, but this whole process is not, it just doesn't lend itself to spec it and get identical pieces of equipment from different bidders. So as part of the study session conversation, they did a really good job of going into detail about the rationale of selecting Pierce. At that time, you may remember we were referring to them as vendor A, B, and C. So I'd like to put Chief and Battalion Chief Herzog on the spot a little bit. We have in the staff report categories that were kind of our rationale and our criteria. But if you could run through those quickly for the record, so that the commission's fully aware, so the listeners at home are aware, kind of how it is that we came to the recommendation of Pierce.
Just you talking about the specs that we asked for.
Yeah, the considerations at the bottom of page 3 and headed.
Well, I don't have that one.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Maybe it's clear.
It's up there.
Yeah,
Okay.
further ahead.
These blue sheets right here.
Page 3, you said.
Somewhere.
I think what I summarized
there
out
you
of the
go.
study session information was the preferred choice was the company that could deliver in a timely
Right.
manner.
That's certainly one of the big
Just one
considerations.
One of the decision lines. So it was timeliness, it was
You can just have it.
manufacturer
Yeah,
that
considerations.
manufactured the complete and total apparatus, all components of it. This way it prevents, something happens with the ladder on the aerial device. Well, you can't go here, you have to go there, and you can't, there are so many variables. Pierce is the only one that manufactures the whole thing.
Well, they actually gave us prices. Some of them wouldn't,
Right.
some of them wouldn't give us prices until they were being manufactured, so we didn't even know.
They
Correct.
give us guesstimates and then
Yeah.
say, when it starts, we'll tell you what it's really going to cost based on what the cost then is.
Correct.
And-
Some of them were estimates at the time. We've worked with a couple of those vendors and got them closer, but they're still estimates because they do not provide, right, the amount of stock apparatus. So there's still having to go to engineering, right? Every time you talk, that's 30 to 45 days, and then it's 30 to 45 days to engineering, and then engineering comes back and says no, and the next thing you know, you're 6 or 7 months down the road before you've even got a truck ordered. So, so what the city manager was asking, you're just talking about the consideration pieces here, right?
Yes, please.
So the pricing, so we did look at that. That's part of the reason that we went with, started looking at Sourcewell, and Deputy City Manager Jacob Wood looked at that, right, vetted that for us. So we looked at that for the pricing piece of getting that, as Commissioner Hoppick was saying, getting that where we are budgeting that, so it's there every year, right? We're not asking for 1.1 this year and 1.2 next year and 900,000 the next year or whatever, so we're able to keep that. So we looked at that. Some of the other pricing considerations you guys may recall from the study session was the inflation piece, right? Our service, because they can, right, is more than what regular inflation is, right? So when we notice inflation at the pump or at the grocery store, it's not that for us because they can charge it because, right, municipalities need these things. So we were looking at that 5% to 10%, possibly a quarter. A couple of these went 4.5% first of the year. Another one of these manufacturers, March 1st, is another 4.5%. When you start talking this kind of money, you're looking $300,000, $400,000 every other month. that this increases. And as you look at trying to go through engineering and trying to go through specs, right, you have that potential for that inflation piece to keep versus we know that we can get these trucks now, we have a set price, and we can move forward. The delivery consideration, same like we were talking about. The other two apparatus manufacturers that we contacted, one does stock trucks for pumpers. As you may recall, it's kind of what we typically think of as a fire truck, right? They can deliver that within a year after we go through a little bit of the specs, so it may be 15 months, but in that year. But everything else, we have to get spec'd out, and then it's a 600-day process from the time we sign contract, which again puts us out there for inflation pieces. I know we talked about motors before, the Cummins motors for these starting now in 2024. The L9 motors, they no longer make, so if you don't have those already, there's an additional $60,000 per truck for those trucks that would need those motors. So there's an additional $100,000 that we're looking at if we go with a different vendor. But the delivery piece is the big thing, and we were pleasantly surprised when we got the last bid back from Pierce. We were looking at like early to maybe mid-25 to get everything because of where they're at in their process. You know, like I just told you, our last piece should be here within 12 months, which is huge. Especially when you're already paying for something, you get it a lot sooner. I mean, for me, it sounds like a good deal. The consolidated production piece, Chief talked about it. So Pierce, everything is done with Pierce. So if we have a problem, it is a Pierce problem. Issues that we have had in the past, I shouldn't say in the past, issues we have now, right? We get a chassis from this manufacturer. The motor comes from this one, the ladder comes from this one. Well, the ladder breaks down. Oh, it's the chassis problem. No, it's a ladder problem. No, and as you may recall, our EVT then is making phone calls right everywhere to try and get that done. The one other one within their umbrella can do that, but again, 600 days, you start talking about all those things, and you still have the possibility of having to go to a different place to get those pieces. And then the specs, they can pretty much match everything that we wanted except for the 100-foot. The big thing that you may recall again that we visited about was setbacks on houses. Our 75-foot quints, a single axle aerial ladder. What we currently have are 75 feet. We continually run into problems. By the time you sit in the street, you have a parked car, 75 feet's not enough. Not that 100 feet is enough for everything, but Pierce offers 107 feet. Another manufacturer that wasn't mentioned in here does build the same I think there's 107, 109, but they never contacted us back at all. So we're kind of left with that. So if we go by that criteria, then we're already into this manufacturer with Pierce. And again, time frame stuff. So I know, yeah, then below that, we have the individual prices for the trucks, so.
Yep. No, that's what I was looking
If
for.
there's-
Thank you.
if there's any other
It's hard to make
question,
a side-by-side comparison, and as I said before, it's not a spec, just a bid and award to low bidder. This was very much more of a subjective consideration and recommendation. Want to make sure you're aware of some of those factors.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I think with the growth and expansion we've seen around the community, we owe it to the people that have invested to have top-flight fire equipment, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Any public comment?
Norman, Salina, this new equipment is going to be updated. Will your operators have to be recertified to operate this?
They'll go through some training, but that's part of the process when the trucks.
Because it is a hydraulic boom. If you're an operator, I used to be a certified crane operator. If while operating a crane, if you kill somebody while you operate it, you're going to jail. 8 years mandatory. That's a federal law. So I'm just asking, will you guys have to be certified on this new?
Correct, yeah, they're already certified on the stuff we have. It's very similar, it's just a different manufacturer of the equipment, but yeah, they'll be running through the process again when we get the new.
That'll test you when you're running a crane that runs 100, picks 100 tons.
From my experience with fire service, if you're not running calls, you're training, so. Any other comment? Ms. Peck, do you know how we're paying for this?
Would you like me to tell you?
Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. As we said at the study session, we mentioned this. As part of the Sales Tax Capital Fund and the increased improvement of that fund, we have allotted in that fund for the annual debt payments of this program for the debt finance for the 10 years out of the Sales Tax Capital Fund. I will mention too that as we did this in November and we brought this forward, one of the things that we talked about was financing through debt financing and or lease financing. And we did a lot of evaluations. We had our financial advisors do evaluations of what that looked like and where the cost was and all that stuff. And while it would have been financially beneficial for us to go early, we felt like because there was a waiting period for the bonds, there was a protest period, we didn't feel like that savings was good enough for us to go before we did that protest period for the public to know that we were doing this and that we were possibly going to finance these things. So at this point, the best beneficial financial part for us is to bond finance these. We do intend to pay it early, which would be the prepayment discount of, as Chief mentioned, $305,000. We'll reimburse ourselves when we bond it in June. There was all these calculations, as I said, which is going to lose us a little bit of interest money, but not nearly as much as what we save in the discount. So we feel like that's the best option at this point.
So we do sell the bonds in June then?
We do, yes.
And so we prepay for these up front?
We prepay for these up front, and then we reimburse ourselves. It'll come out of our fund balance, out of the general fund, and then we'll reimburse ourselves when we issue the bonds to go back into that fund, yes.
And did we assume a 4.5%, 6% interest rate? Do you remember what it was?
It was 4.1 on the bonds.
Was what?
4.1.
4.1. And is okay.
Yep. Hopefully it'll be a little lower by then, but you never know. So, any other questions?
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor Longbine, I move this commission authorize the city manager to enter into a purchasing agreement with Conrad Fire Equipment for the specific or specified fire apparatus at the amount of $8,939,831.13 with a 5% contingency for 2 new Pierce Enforcer pumpers, 2 new Pierce Enforcer heavy-duty rescues, 2 new Pierce Enforcer 107-foot quints, 1 new Pierce Enforcer 100-foot elevated platform.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize the city manager to enter in a purchasing agreement with Conrad Fire Equipment for the specified fire apparatus at an amount of $8,939,831.13 with a 5% contingency to purchase 7 new fire trucks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. And I look forward to getting a ride in the new truck. Get it.
Trucks.
You and me both.
You cannot drive.
Okay, we have no developmental business. Is there any commissioner that has any other business they'd like to bring forward?
Just remind everybody, Wednesday we have 9 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay.
9 o'clock orientation for.
And is that open to the public if they wish to attend?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And it'll be broadcast as well.
Okay. And that's it.
Location for the public.
TPEC.
Right.
Yeah, upstairs?
Be upstairs?
Yep. at TPEC.
Yes.
one issue, and it don't need immediate action, but I've heard from several people about if we were going, or asked if we were going to further simplify, reduce the price for, come on, brain, don't do this, neighborhood block parties. Through the, still keep the permits, and I can't remember what the revised price was. But if we're trying to promote sense of neighborhood, neighbors getting to know each other and communicating, it was felt to be a way to
I don't remember.
foster.
We cut everything in half, didn't we? Wasn't that kind of?
Yeah, the block. I think it was 200 or 250 for a block party before.
Was it that much?
Yeah, it was enough to pretty much kill them.
If it's okay, what I can do is certainly get you that information, and then if you wish to take it up further, you can let staff know.
Okay.
I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
I just remember we cut it in half.
Right.
You're looking forward to summer.
Very much so. But yes.
Okay. I just wondered if anyone else saw an unusual amount of fireworks last night. My dog and I wonder what is going on, but go Chiefs. Quite a ball game. So that will bring us to Citizens Forum. State your name and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Mark Labus. Now, I know we had a water treatment plan. I know the numbers that you used. Now, since 2010, we've lost about 1,500 citizens here in Salina, Kansas by Nielsburg, I believe, and actually by the Census Bureau. So one can draw from that. We have a housing shortage, or a cheap housing shortage crisis here in Salina, Kansas. But if you lose that many people, why do you need all that housing? Unless someone's got some game in for construction, which would go along with the water treatment plant. And also clear back because a previous city commissioner let it out beforehand, Melissa Hodges, on Facebook, that there was going to be a mask mandate, or tried to make a panic of it 2 weeks prior. And then Salina Regional ended up with a whole bunch of money, bought up a whole bunch of properties, a whole bunch of hospitals around here, including, and had another one built in Concordia, bought up, and then did some construction. Well, if we tie these all together, they have one thing in common: construction. Kind of like the tennis courts and doing something with business, because you know what? It's been proven time and time again. Sports stuff does not bring revenue in. It's just temporary. Soccer fields and etc. All we're doing is propping up someone else's business, realistically. And if I had to guess, the next thing that's probably going to come down the pipeline from the federal government is something about small businesses, because Lauren Driscoll does have ties to an organization that has ties to Washington, D.C., and the UM, because they did a symposium there. So it was very likely that, because it doesn't take that many people to control everything, there's a good chance that she has something to do with it. And I'm not saying everybody on this commission has anything to do with it, but it looks awful, awful funny once you start drawing all the lines. I have a ton more information, but it's limited to that. I also got to point out, if Salina Public Relations was doing their job, because some of you got my email about pit bulls in the ban. Actually, someone with a disability can have a pit bull. That was done in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding areas. So you might want to think about doing that, because if you have that issue here, considering it was already fought elsewhere, you could open yourselves for a lawsuit.
Hi, I'm Laura Deckert, and I have come to state my concern about the Ambassador Hotel.
It is my side yard, and for one, it is an eyesore to visitors coming in to Salina off the interstate on Crawford, and to everyone else who drives down Crawford and sees it. Two, the hotel, as I said, is my direct neighbor to the south of my home. My property directly borders it. Three, I am tired of calling the police every time I see people breaking the boards off, breaking the glass, entering into it. It's bringing crime into my neighborhood, and there are many families with small children there. I would like to see it torn down and maybe even an apartment complex for housing, because they say we need housing. I am a widow and I can't afford to move, and it's bringing my property value down. And I just wanted to share my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deckert, and I think we all echo your concerns. And I will say that I observe that property every time I drive by, and yesterday I noticed it looked like they boarded up the windows with, I don't know if it's metal or what it might have been. Do you have anything on that?
I don't know what they specifically. I'm not sure what they specifically boarded it up with. I do know that we have a boarding standard for windows as part of our property maintenance code, and code enforcement staff regularly go by that particular location. They have kind of a regular cycle on a couple of problem locations. So our conversations with them have been boarding up, and then, as Ms. Decker indicated, breaking back in that repeated cycle. So I'd be happy to speak with Ms. Decker after the meeting to share a little bit more detail, but we're looking at code enforcement options.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sorry, Mr. Labus, you've had your...
I did not aware in your things that I could not come up again.
No.
No?
No, no,
So
sir.
you're going to, I'm just asking, can the city staff please show me where it says I'm only allowed to come up once?
We can do that after the meeting.
Then I'm gonna say it right here.
Okay.
Just because someone else's property looks like crap does not affect your property value. That's a myth, because it's nowhere
Okay.
to get.
Okay, Mr. Labus.
The gavel.
We do. All right. Woo! Does not get easy still. Richard Albert Humphrey II, 315 South Ohio. Personal apologies from the 22nd, 2024 Citizens Forum. Addressing City Council unprofessionally is not acceptable. I'd like to thank Project Pollinate for reminding me that it's a blessing to exercise my truth here. Developing my public relationship skills as an advocate for my elders will take time. This logo here, Project Pollinate, founded in Santa Cruz, is open to assessing the initial phases of starting a chapter in Salina, Kansas for volunteering. Drew Glover, founder, will be flying in from Selma, Alabama to consult my resources within our county and celebrate the equinox March 19th. You'll be invited. Purpose of today is actually detaching from the Salina Rescue Mission 58 garden beds and their unique watering system. I don't resonate with their mission statement, so it's been suggested I digress and respect their visions with their land. And share the foundation of my 3-year dream real fast. Hopefully my open source MVP advocacy speaks to collaborators with interest in building the all-American city I believe in. Those students interested in garden beds and helping family friends in need, look into the $1,000 Oliver Hag Memorial Scholarship by Salina County. My mission for a community capstone project titled Project Pollinate is reconstructing career paths by/from reconnecting the end-of-life cycle to/through deconstructing the harvest of a plant. My vision for the first year harvest was with my fresh squeezed to taste, was to mimic the Santa Cruz Homeless Garden Project and feed the Feast on Faith through community collaborations. A reminder that the local FoodWorks grant is still up and willing to collaborate with 2025 grants if granted. I'm here. To activate fair exchanges business philosophy. Phase is, I guess in a language that few I understand, is my community believes its strength in its process of strengthening individual surroundings by incentivizing the concept that our projects are our resumes in action with the interest in building bridges to building communities. I suggest our city implement trademark, copyrights, intellectual property rights professionals to secure our community's upcoming young professionals. Growing your own food is one of the oldest forms of rebellion. I would also, real quick, skip all that, recognize the Salina Museum. They had a luncheon for volunteers. I hold the shirt proudly because mental health reasons. As a friend of Bill's story, I believe that being of service of others is how we win. And thanks to all that take me in consideration, and thank you again. Have a great week or two.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. We will see you on February 22nd.